All right, call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the preliminary agenda review. So if everybody wants to get out their preliminary agendas for next week's work session. The invocation will be led by Councilmember Nye. You ready for that? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Sorry, Mayor.
So Councilmember Nye will read the invocation next week. We'll have a few guests. On the consent agenda, we have a public hearing on the Community Development Block Grant Needs hearing. That'll be next week. The consent agenda includes a battalion vehicle for the fire department. The Department of Community and Economic Development has the 2014 Western Maryland Blues Fest. Police have a predictive policing software, and the Department of Utilities has a pump assembly, and that's it for the consent agenda. Any questions for staff on those items? Just want to remind everybody that next week we will have a 5 o'clock work session on the budget prior to our regular session. Unfinished business next week, the property maintenance code for smoke detectors and the amendment to Chapter 176 regarding peddlers and transient merchants. New business will be the approval of a resolution for the USMH Police Services Memorandum of Understanding, the approval of a resolution for the Main Street designation, approval of a legal services contract, bulk diesel fuel purchase. Chime in if you got any questions about any of these. Bulk diesel and bulk gasoline purchases, water chemical purchase, wastewater chemical purchase, the approval of the pavement preservation list for 2014 and 2015, the acceptance of Maryland Bikeways grant, and the approval of an application for the FY 2015 program open space projects.
On the bikeways grant, I think people ought to, look at that. I don't think we've had it. I think, people ought to just, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the street selection, things like that, but I think council members ought to take a look.
Is your mic on, Mr. Brubaker?
Council members ought to take a look at the list of streets involved and so forth if they haven't had a chance already. That is one, where there's, it looks constructive to me, but I just wanted to make sure people saw it.
And we could accept the grant, and then when we have the work plan really finalized,
Okay.
I can bring it back into a work session. You can go over it and review it then if you'd like.
Yeah. Because there, like I said, there's a work plan attached proposing certain streets to be reinforced as bikeways.
Right.
Are there new bikeways on any of these, or are they just reinforcement?
Just pavement markings. It'd be new
On existing
Yeah.
bikeways,
Yeah.
that was.
Well, no.
No, they're new.
existing.
Pennsylvania Avenue, for instance, would have a bike lane on it. Is that what you're asking, if there
Yeah,
would be new bike lanes?
new.
Yes, there would be.
Yeah, that's what I wasn't clear about.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just saying, I think it's great that we're getting the grant. I just think council members ought to take a look at the work plan that's attached to it, if they haven't already. That was just a, okay? Thanks, Rod.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have, once we get the grant, we have flexibility.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff on the preliminary agenda? Okay. Moving right along in our agenda here. We have a presentation on water and wastewater rates, the 5-year rate plan. So I'm going to welcome utilities team and consultants that helped them do this study. Would you like to introduce
Absolutely.
our guests?
Of course, Nancy's to my left and Nelia to the right. Out of the utility staff, Dave Hyder from Municipal and Financial Services is with us, and Tracy Moore is also with us too. We're great assistance to all of us in the preparation of the plan. Of course, we had input from from Bruce and Michelle Hepburn also, and had meetings in regard to what we're going to present to everyone tonight. I'd like to I'll go through the memo real quick and give you some highlights, and then Dave and all of us together then will go through the PowerPoint presentation where we can actually apply some of the numbers for some of the verbiage that I discussed through the memo. I tried to keep it as short as possible. In the future, we'll have a longer expanded memo once we get through the information tonight and make some tweaks to that for further review by the mayor and council. We went through, I guess, a few weeks ago when we were in, just how we want to proceed forward in the time frame. The only changes in there, we'd like to maybe shoot for a late February or early March adoption if possible, if we can work through any issues that the mayor and council see with the plan through our meetings that we're going to have in the future on that. Once again, for any meetings that we have planned, that's your choice on the process on how we want to proceed. I think we did a 2+2 type committee last time, or had staff and 2 members, but whatever so chooses, mayor and council so choose, we'll go forward with that. I guess for the goals of the plan, we only really have to make one statement on that from our side, and that's the financial solvency of the water and the wastewater funds. We had discussed somewhat the assumptions that we went through last time. Of course, the fees and charge collected, we want to continue to be self-supporting funds as we've been throughout the years. We did make an assumption for a 3% inflation rate. Our growth rate, we considered flat at 0.5%, and our consumption growth rate for what we've seen for the past few years at 0.5%. Some assumptions we made in regard to developing the financial plans. I'll make some general statements that are basically related to the PowerPoint presentation that we'll go through once again with the numbers for a little bit later, but current water and wastewater rates, if we continue, will not be adequate for the system in the out years of 2016 to 2019. We're okay for fiscal year 15. We do still have 4 unfunded positions within the wastewater groups who are trying to manage our costs the best we can. Our fixed fees were, our last calculation, we're running about 89% in the water and the wastewater system, so we don't have a lot to play with for cost-cutting measures. On the wastewater side, we do continue to have 2 unfunded positions there. We do some to try to keep our costs down, as we've discussed before. We do some vehicle trading, some assistance from the other utilities, other water side and the electric side, and assistance for staff and equipment to try to keep our costs low. The projection for the rate for the wastewater is a little bit more than we have on the water side. Our cash position in wastewater is not nearly as strong as we would like to see, much weaker than on the wastewater side. Hence the reason for an increase, so that we don't run out of cash in fiscal year 15 on the wastewater side. If you go to page 3, we've hit the proposed rate adjustments during the review of our financial plan. Of course, developing the financial plan, we use the CIPs that have been developed in our 4- and 5-year plans that are in the budget book. We did make some minor changes and additions in regard to the Synagro contract that we recently signed, the work that we're going to complete over the next 5 year of that contract, which is, we've delayed for the last between 5 to 7 years, accounts for about $1 million a year in extra CIP for the wastewater. So that's been placed into the rate increase. As you can see, for the water rates, flat 15 through 19, 2% increase. Wastewater increase is a requested 12% for fiscal year 15, 4% in 16 and 17, and then moderates out to 2% into the out years. We look at all of the charges that the wastewater and water divisions receive from our customer base. Our surcharges on wastewater are in line. We recently completed the local limit study this summer, which confirmed our approach and the methodology we use in collecting the information for the surcharges, so there's no increase in that. Our grinder pumps for the low pressure system, we have a maintenance program that we perform on all those that we have taken over in the past years. There's no reason to do an increase in the grinder pump program fees. Benefit charges. We're not proposing any increase in our benefit charges. As with most businesses that rely on growth, we would love to see the economy pick up. Our CIP is greatly benefited by the charges we received in allocation fees for water and wastewater. Everyone wants to see the economy pick up, and nobody more than we do in regard to usage for us. The Conicajig and Martin's Crossroads, when we took those over in 2002, we basically took over the debt, and they've been paying that debt back. That will go down to $14.50 per billing period in 14, and then it will decrease to $6 per EDU for fiscal year 16 and beyond until the debt's extinguished, which is in 2024, when those bonds will be paid off. Fire line charges, which, we supply private fire line service to many of our commercial industrial customers. We are requesting an annual increase of 3% to the increased cost of operation and inflationary cost in regard to that product that we do serve to those customers. The proposed rates, when we list out the numbers, we can talk about percentages, but for the true effect on our customers, until you see the numbers that it brings out and the comparisons with other local utilities, I don't know what to say about the water side except as what better bargain do our customers have for the charges we have for water. When you look against what we're looking at is the town of Smithsburg, Cumberland, Frostburg, Funkstown, Frederick, Martinsburg, and Winchester. For 13,000 gallons per quarter, all those utilities charge anywhere from $59 to $127 for 13,000 gallons of water. We're charging $25.60. And with a 2% increase into the out years, starting in fiscal year 15, the rate for 13,000 gallons of water per quarter would be $26.12 to $28.23. That's a $2.50 increase over a 5-year period. I think very reasonable. Wastewater, you all are aware of all the issues that EPA, MDE responds to in regard to the cleanup of the bay. We're at the forefront and still are in our treatment process with ENR, our headworks, and our disinfection projects. All very expensive to fund and operate. We did have some assistance and grant funding from MDE a few years ago, about $8.5 million. But for our wastewater rates, the first year jump is 12% to try to assist us in reaching some financial solvency in the early part of the next 5-year rate study projections, to go from $74 to $83.49, and then a great moderation in the out years to $94.05 for wastewater services at 13,000 gallons per quarter. It amounts to, a quick calculation, about $22 over 5 years is the increase that our customers would see. When we look at the study, and Dave, when we pull the information together, our average residential customer is approximately 8,500 gallons. I know it's very close to what I use, and we look at accounts for individuals that are setting in here and all of us that actually use it. And it does run pretty close for a family of 2 or 3 that's fairly conservative. So charges for water and wastewater services for customers that use 8,500 gallons per quarter, it's approximately 90 cents per day. We believe a very reasonable amount for the services that we provide. Outside would be approximately $1.70. I did a final comparison on page 5, just extrapolated out for 13,000 gallons per quarter, just looking at outside rates, and these are with local utilities that you can do apples to comparison between the city and us for the rates that we charge our outside customers for water and wastewater services. Our outside rates for 13,000 gallons for fiscal year 15 with the projection would be $205 per quarter. They ranged in anywhere from $292, $239 to $340 for the same service. So once again, the city of Hagerstown is is definitely at the forefront of providing quality and expensive service for the water and wastewater customers we have. We would just like to see more of them come on our system. I did a final chart, and Scott, I don't think is up here yet, but, I'm sorry, brother. We can get to that at the end. We'll go through the PowerPoint presentation, but we do an aging and arrearing analysis on collectibles and water and wastewater. And we know we always had some questions in regard to carrying charges and how we set our rates, utility rate basis versus cash basis, and we can kind of touch on that a little bit at the end. But if everyone's okay with what I've gone through so far, we'll go to the PowerPoint presentation and look at some numbers, and Dave will lead us through that. Let me get, it's just a...
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, good afternoon, Mayor, Council. It's good to be here. Thanks for having us. What we want to talk about, Mike's covered a lot of the details, but I wanted to just give you an overview of the study. So our discussion this evening will be on the summary of findings, what the cost of providing water and sewer service is in terms of revenue requirements, and a financial plan to address how we're going to fund those revenue requirements, what the impacts are on your customers if you take the financial plan approach, and then open it up for any questions and discussion. So starting off with our summaries and findings and recommendations, we're finding that based on the city's projected water and sewer sales, that with the current water and sewer rates, the city will not generate sufficient revenues to cover the system expenses beginning in fiscal year 15. That's both on the water and the sewer side. The shortfalls on the sewer side in terms of the revenues are more substantial, and they will result in completely exhausting the sewer fund cash balance by fiscal year 15. So there's a more dire need on the sewer side. In order to address those shortfalls, what we're recommending is that you take a phased approach to increasing water and sewer rates, and that would ensure the financial health of each system. And as Mike has mentioned, on the water side, it's truly just inflationary, a little bit actually less than inflation at 2% per year. That will ensure that revenues stay in line with expenditures. On the sewer side, there is the substantial increase in 15 that really rights the ship on the sewer side, followed by a little bit more than inflationary increases in 16 and 17, and then the modest increases in 18 and 19. So once we get to a point where revenues are more in line with expenditures in 15, we can take that more glide path going forward. So next, in terms of what it costs to provide water and sewer service, that's in these revenue requirements. What we would typically call the building blocks of revenue requirements are shown on this slide. It's your operating and maintenance expenditures, it's keeping the lights on, it's treating the sewage and producing the water, any existing debt payments that you have for previously funded capital projects. It's the CIP and the funding of that CIP, either in the form of projected debt service or cash funding of capital projects. And then any necessary contributions to reserves. The summation of those gives us our total revenue requirements. So the revenue requirements on the water side, you can see listed here in the table we're showing over the next 5 years. We have the operating expenses, so it costs about $8.25 million to operate the water system. We're inflating that at 3% per year, so that increases to 9.29 by fiscal year 19. Then you can come on down to the capital side. On the capital side, we have any existing debt payments that we have. So you can see the pay down of existing debt over time. There's projects within the CIP that are going to be cash funded from current revenues. That's shown on the cash funded capital projects line. And then we're forecasting the issuance of new debt, so we have projected debt service associated with funding the CIP. On the water side, there's no need for contributions to reserves. There's adequate funds currently to fund those reserves. So our total revenue requirements, total cost of providing water is $12.23 million in 15. It's increasing to about $14 million by 19. Next, we look at any miscellaneous revenues that we get. So penalties, interest income, things of that sort would reduce the total revenue requirements. We also take out benefit charge revenues and the use of any capital fund balance to fund some of those capital projects. So the end result there is what needs to be recovered from rates, $10.33 million in fiscal year 15, going up to 11.96 in 19. Important to note that we are funding from cash on hand, $1.7 million would be set aside in a 3R reserve. And so that would be there, so there's no need for contributions, as I mentioned. So the next is to look at, okay, if we need to fund $10.33 million, what does that look like in comparison to our current revenues with current rates? So you can see there we're forecasting revenues of $10.61 million in 15 from current water rates. Then projecting that forward, assuming a modest growth rate in customers at 0.5%, there would be a slight increase in revenues from water usage. But even with that slight increase, you can see the losses that would occur in fiscal year 16, 17, 18, and 19. There's no funding of reserves, so as a result of that, your beginning cash balance of unrestricted water fund balance is 3.42. That would be almost completely exhausted by fiscal year 19 with those losses. So we just have a graphic representation here. Again, this is the net revenue requirements, what you need to recover from water rates. Next would be the projected revenues with current rates. Our minimum cash balance that's recommended, which would include 2 months of operating and the 1% of the system assets. And you can see if we don't adjust water rates that we would fall below that recommended minimum balance in fiscal year 18. So what's being proposed is that we have a financial plan. This is the 2% increases. It would fund the system revenue requirements that were shown on page 6 of the presentation. It would ensure that we maintain the minimum cash balance of 2 months operating plus 1% of the replacement cost of the system. And really, it's just a 2% over the 5 years, keeps revenues in line with expenditures. In doing so, your unrestricted water fund cash balance would remain about where it is today. Slight increase in 16, but comes back down to $3.66 million in 19. So what this looks like graphically, again, our net revenue requirements, our water revenues with the projected increases, our minimum cash balance, and then our unrestricted cash balance plus the reserve balance would be maintained above the minimum cash balance. So that's the water side. Moving on to the sewer side, we do the same analysis. We have the sewer revenue requirements. The cash position is not nearly as good on the sewer side, so we are recommending some contributions to both an operating reserve and a capital reserve. So you can see operating expenses going from $10 million up to $11.29 million in 19. Looking at capital expenditures, you have existing debt at about $2 million per year now. That's being paid off over the next 5 years to reduced to 1.89 by fiscal year 19. You can see cash funded capital projects and the projected debt service. When we come all the way down to the bottom, you can see your net revenue requirement, what you need to recover from sewer rates is at 12.2, increasing to about 13.31 million by fiscal year 19. Whoops, back one. One more. One more. Gonna go back? No?
It may not.
No?
No.
Okay. Well, I know people have it in their handouts. Let me pull up my handout real quick. What we're looking at on the sewer side when we bring over those net revenue requirements is shown on slide 7. So again, we have a net revenue requirement on the sewer side in 15 of 10.33 million, increasing to about 12 million by 19. Nope, I'm looking at the wrong one. Apologize. Slide 12. Okay, so net revenue requirement is 12.2 million, increasing to 13.3. You can see we have significant shortfalls when we look at our revenues from current sewer rates, generating about 10.9 million in fiscal year 15, going up to about 11 million in 19. But the bottom line is that we're running deficits of about $2 million a year on the sewer side, which would completely exhaust, as I mentioned earlier, the cash balance in fiscal year 15. So you'd be basically if we don't make the contributions to reserves in 12, we're looking at basically completely depleting the cash balance in fiscal year 15 with the current sewer rates. So now on to the next one. We have that graphically. We have the net revenue requirements. Our revenues with current sewer rates are below the net revenue requirements the entire period, so we're running a deficit the entire period. Our cash balance is starting at about zero. So when we look at the final line here, you can see that your unrestricted balance goes negative in fiscal year 15 and just goes further and further negative throughout the period. So in order to address that, our financial plan would be to fund the revenue requirements shown on page 11. And this is necessary to ensure the financial viability of the sewer fund. We would love to be able to not have such a substantial increase in 15, but because of the lack of cash, there really needs to be a correction in that first year in fiscal year 15. So we're looking at a 12% increase in 15, followed by 2 years of 4%, and then 2% in 18 and 19. You can see the cash balance would be much healthier. We're starting at 1.19 with that 12% increase, growing it to 4.5 by fiscal year 19. So here you can see net revenue requirements projected forward. Next would be revenues with current rates. You can see that they're now in line with the net revenue requirements. We have our minimum cash balance. And with this financial plan, by fiscal year 18, we're essentially now above our minimum cash balance. We now have some reserves set aside and have a healthier balance. So the impact to customers are shown here. We're showing some sample bills. This is for inside city residential customers, showing you a wide range. Most residential customers have a 5/8 or 3/4 inch meter. We're showing 4 different sample usage types, so 2,000 gallons per quarter, an extremely low user. Their current bill is $36.05 per quarter. That would go up to $39. And then you can see on throughout the projection period, the average customer uses about 8,500 gallons per quarter. So their bill is going from $73.95 up to $80.92, which is about a $7 increase per quarter. And then you can see once we do that 12% increase, it's right around $2 per quarter. 13,000 gallons, obviously the bill is higher. It's going from 100 to 109. And then a high using residential customer at 20,000 gallons per quarter would go from 143 up to 156. We have the same information just shown for the outside city rates. So you can see the impact there. So that is the presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions and engage in any discussion that you may have.
Mike, this is not I presume this is presented for further study.
Yes, sir.
What is your goal to have this approved? Before the budget process?
Yes, sir. In the regular session of last of February, or if we would maybe have a special session early in March, we would appreciate if we could work through all the issues and have it prepared so it can be entered into the budget. It would definitely assist Michelle and the rest of us.
I just have a number of points I'd like to bring up, whether
Yes, sir.
it resolves them. One is, the last council approved, I think it was a steady 5%, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. When the study started, we made an initial request, as we are now, for
Right.
a bulk increase for the
And
first year.
we
then steady,
approved,
but-
it was 5%.
But we moderated it out, correct?
For both funds.
Yes, sir, for both
Right,
funds.
that's what I recall.
Yes, sir.
Because we studied that.
Yes, sir, we did.
I guess, I don't know whether it's in the main study, this is a summary, but I would like to see what happened with that 5%. Because personnel costs should have stayed fairly level, because during that period, there weren't significant personnel increases. And so I guess I would like to see what that 5%, what happened to that 5% compared to what we were projecting. And that would help me evaluate the future years. Because, we're arriving apparently at a fund deficit on the sewer side, and yet we didn't certainly project that when we agreed to the 5%.
In the previous study, when we started out and then made a change it to moderate out, we knew that we would not reach financial solvency in the wastewater fund until the end of the fourth or the fifth year, and we have accomplished that. We do have a surplus, albeit small. So we operated at a deficit for those first 3 years of the study. Operating at a deficit, what it does to us, it makes us cash strapped. We cannot pre-fund any major CIP. Just as now we're working through issues with the fiscal year 13 bond, so we're basically 12 months behind in receiving a reimbursement for a bond, so we have to defer CIP year after year by being cash strapped, by not having that cash up front in a larger increase in the first year. So that's what it does to us in the field for our operating. It does moderate it for the customers, it does make it easy for the customers, but for the wastewater operations manager, the superintendents that plan all the work, we really have to defer projects that we want to do, just once again, because we can't pre-fund them. I'm afraid to move ahead if something would happen, to end up with more of a negative cash balance than we already were proposed to have in those earlier years.
Well, nevertheless, I'd like to see what happened with actual expenditures
Sure.
versus, in your usual categories, personnel, operating costs.
Yes.
Debt service, compared to what we were saying, and because,
We were using a higher growth rate back in 2009, when we were doing the projections in 2009.
We use 1.5?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's more than that.
Was it more?
Yeah, and the benefit charges, we were estimating it to be.
Yeah, and we didn't realize any of those
Yeah.
charges, so.
on the other hand, personnel costs should have been
Yes,
less,
yeah.
because we
Yeah.
did not have, significant employee increases during all or most of that time. So that's why I just want to
Yeah.
see how it happens, and it helps me think ahead.
Yes, sir.
And second of all, are your CIP assumptions in this study based on the current approved CIP?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Except for the addition of the Centigro work that we're going to do. We did increase, we had money in for Centigro each year. We had to bump it up to $1 million a year for the next 5 years in CIP to accomplish what we need to bring the system up to
Was that
standards for
PAYGO?
Centigro. Yes.
That was PAYGO?
It's PAYGO.
PAYGO, not
Yes.
debt service, right?
Yes. Well, we had that as a mixture, didn't we, Nelia?
Yeah.
We'll have it as PAYGO
Yeah,
and debt,
in
and
debt, yeah.
and bonded debt for
Bonded
that.
debt, yeah.
Okay, but that's in addition to the approved.
To the addition to the approved budget,
CIP.
that's the only
I
changes
guess,
we
again, I'd
made.
like to, to look at that.
Yes, sir.
See how that works out. And that relates to my next question. If you had to, if we said to smooth this, to make it an even ramping up, I think is the term you guys would use, what would you do? How would you do it? Just carry a reserve, build your reserve more slowly, change capital projects, or what would you do if the council said, smooth this out, don't give us such a sudden increase? I'm not saying I recommend that, I just need
understand,
to
but
know
once
the
again, our
answer.
fixed fees are running 88 to 89%, so we have that 11% to change. We're already holding 2 current positions open. We've also held our openings longer. We have some positions open for 5 months, which helps saves us on the revenue side for not filling that position. What it would do to us financially, we would operate basically as we did in the past 5 years. We would have to defer CIP. Our cash position would be much less if we had any major issue that happened in that time. We may have to do a short-term borrow for any type of major blow-up or something if we had on the system. At the end of the 5 years, we would end up in the same position. It would just handcuff us for the early part of the
Well,
years.
let's say, again, hypothetically, we
Yes, sir.
said, okay, let's build up the reserve more gradually rather than restoring it in FY15. It would,
Yeah, we could defer the 3 Rs until the out years, because
Yeah.
we're currently not funding it anyway.
Yeah, I just want to say that probably 99% of that 12% increase isn't to fund reserves. We're basically bringing revenues up to expenditures in the first year. So we're really, it would have to be a deferral of, you'd have to cut operating costs somehow, and it would have to be deferral of CIP. I don't want people to think that the reason for these increases is to build up cash in the fund. That's a result. Over the 5 years that will happen, you'd get to where we're recommending. But in those first couple of years, it's really righting the ship. It's bringing our revenues on the sewer side up to the expenditures.
all right, and that relates to my first point. We just need to have a better, how we
Yeah.
got
Yes,
sir.
there.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And then I think you can make your make your comparisons even more advantageous. I think, I didn't see exactly a chart in here comparing the combined inside city rates with other cities. You did combined outside, but I didn't see combined inside. You did inside water and sewer separately, but they're not added together, so you can't see what your total bill is versus Frederick's total bill. You can't see, which is, from just doing it in my head, it looks like it's advantageous, certainly. So build that advantage, because most people inside pay both water and sewer.
Correct.
It's not necessarily true outside, but
Right.
but inside, almost everybody pays both.
You're correct.
And another thing that you might think about is showing the combined percent increase, not just, you know, the rate for the one and the rate for the other. I mean, you do show the numbers, and you do have a breakdown of what the
Yes, sir.
bill change is, but I think, you know, showing the percent change is good too. So those are two things I think help. I know it's predominantly the sewer side, so it's you can't split it in the middle. I know that, but still, I think it might help. Think about it.
Okay, no, absolutely.
And again, showing with the other jurisdictions the combined inside city rate, like you did for the outside, would help.
Okay.
Because I think people don't understand that, what our past investments in the system provide in benefits now. So those are my main points at the moment.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mike, real quick, I think in that history, didn't we have $1 million transfer from water to wastewater in 11, 12, and then
And
the rating
we rescind-
agencies discouraged us from doing that?
And we cut.
So that was part of
other
that
CIP.
history.
Yeah, we deferred vehicle purchase at that point in time, so we really did not require that 1 million. We were looking ahead if we fully funded what we had for that fiscal year, so that's correct. We did not require that. And you're right, the bond funding agencies kind of winced at it when we brought that forward.
Any
Yes,
other
sir.
questions, Mr. Alshine?
Couple. And maybe these are really two different memos, so I'm going to try and focus my questions on them separately. The first is, if I read the PowerPoint correctly, the 2% static ramped escalation in the water side.
Yes, sir.
Basically, we have $3.5 million in there now. If we don't do anything, we go down to $300,000. 2% a year is going to keep us at $3.5 million.
Yes, sir.
And that's generally how that functions. And I don't have a huge issue with that because when you look at the do nothing versus do something, what you have at the end of the day is about what you start with. But if you go to page 12 on the sewer side, it looks like there's clearly a difference. And the reason I guess I asked this is because you're looking at a 12% jump, but the static ramp up that you see on the water side doesn't exist on the sewer side. What you see is a slow, even though you're implementing a heftier percentage increase at the front, you're seeing a more perpendicular drive on the graph toward the fifth year on the sewer side. So when you look at that page, though, it looks like the do nothing versus do something. If you do nothing, you're at 6 million in the hole versus 200,000 in the hole. But then if you go to the do something, you go from 200,000 in the hole to $1 million in the good in the first year, which ramps up to $4.5 million to the good in year 5. And I think maybe this gets to a bit of Marty's question. When I look at the water side, it clearly makes sense that you're trying to maintain that static, secure, and stable fund reserve.
Correct.
Sewer side doesn't have it right now,
No, none.
but I just look at that 12% and go and have to question why we are growing from, and I understand we don't want to be 6 million to the bad, but the impetus for such a hefty increase to get us to $4.5 million in reserves. And that's a significant increase. The water side, it's pretty static.
Right.
3.5 million at day 1, 3.5 million at day 5. Sewer side, 0 in the bank to 4.5 million in the bank.
Yeah, and I don't know if we can flip to it so people can see the, oops.
It's page 12 and page 14.
Page 12 and 14. Yeah, yep. And I think actually page 15 is helpful as well.
Page 12 and page 14 are the, all right, so that's page 14. Go back, that's 13. Now go to 12 first. Just keep going back. There you go. Do nothing. We're 100 grand in the hole, right? Year 5, we're at 6.5 million in the hole. Do nothing. If you go to page 14, which is that 12%, 4, 4, 2, and 2 escalation, we go from 100,000 in the hole to $1 million in the good the first year, which is good. But as that percentile decreases, you jump to $4.5 million to the good. And all I'm saying is, I'm curious why we're doing 12% right out of the gate, dropping it significantly to get ourselves up to $4.5 million. Is there some CIP reason for doing so?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's out your CIP.
Yeah, and I think,
Are we
and then,
building up for an out-year CIP expense?
well, there's a couple things. One, yeah, it's to your point, and one is, and I think we can come back with more information to show exactly. The reality is that first year, if we go back and say, we're starting at I think it's about, what's our unrestricted cash balance on the sewer side before you do this? So
900,000.
you're starting at about $1 million on the sewer side today. So if we don't do anything in 15, you're now at a negative 120.
Yep.
So what we're saying is in that first year, let's raise rates to bring revenues up with expenditures so that we maintain what we have today, which is a slight bit more than the $1 million. The 12% basically lets you keep what you have today. At
So in a single year, we are going to impose a rate that will give us a $2 million swing.
No,
900 to the good goes to 120 to the bad versus going to 1.19 to the good.
basically it's saying that we're pretty much keeping the cash that we have in the sewer if we do a 12%. Because if you're running an operation that has, total revenues of $15 million on the sewer side.
Right.
And if you're only holding $900,000, there's not much of a cushion there. So we would recommend that in that first year, we increase revenues so that we can keep that $900,000 in cash.
Okay, but that isn't what the sheet says. Sheet 12 clearly says in FY15, 120,000 to the bad. When I look at
Right.
the water side, it
If you
says
don't do anything.
3.6 million to the
Correct.
good
Correct.
and going down. So sheet 12 should say in FY15, 900,000 to the good, if it's consistent with how you've reported on the water side.
No, because if you go back to slide 7, if we're looking at water, and I don't.
Yep, 3.42 million.
We're at 3.42.
Mm-hmm.
We do a 2% increase on water, we actually increase to 3.6.
Right, about $200,000.
Correct.
And what I'm saying is if you go to sheet 12 and 14, they don't read that way because it says FY15 on sheet 12, 120,000 to the bad when you're telling me we're $900,000 to the good right now.
Right now, but this is the end of fiscal year 15.
After 12% increase.
Right, which means
No.
so,
So-
sheet 12,
Sheet 12 is no increases, we don't do
Right.
anything. We're going to be at the end of 15, we're going to run out of money. We're going to be at $120,000.
Point
understand.
of clarification, the 900,000 now,
It's
what,
14.
14?
It's 14.
14.
That's
It's
14.
14.
14.
Okay,
As of today, 14. If we don't do anything at the end of 15, we're going to
That's
be,
actually 13, we don't know what it is gonna be in 14. It could be, 900,000.
True.
That's
Okay.
your projection.
Yeah.
all right.
so we're saying that if we don't do anything, we're going to run out of money in 15.
Uh-huh,
But to right the ship, we're saying do a 12% increase, which will keep you at where we think you are today, $900,000 cash balance within the sewer fund. If we don't do anything, we're at $120,000
All
short.
right. Okay.
So that first year really isn't getting you, it's not making you jump to 4.5 million. It's,
No, it's taking us from 900K down to negative 120,
If we do
if
not.
you don't do
or about $1
anything.
million loss.
Right.
If you don't do anything,
And it's taking us to 1.2
if you do the increase.
if we do the increase.
Right.
So the swing is about 1.3.
Right.
Right. And then when we look out to where we're getting to 4.5 million, if we look at slide 15, we're saying you should have a minimum cash balance within the sewer fund of 2 months of operating, plus 1% of the replacement cost of system assets. So we do reach that in 18 and exceed it slightly in 19. So if we were saying that, and that's our recommended absolute minimum balance, what you could do, and I'm not recommending this, is in those outer years in 17 and 18, you know, if there's concern that you're going too much above the minimum balance, that's
mean,
where
you're-
you could
you're-
adjust the rates.
I mean, the way I'm reading this, you're going $2 million over. Because you're supposed to be at about 2.7, you're going to 4.5.
Right, but that would include, that includes the restricted balance as well.
See that, Kristen, can I interject a
Yeah.
moment? I think, you know, I was asking about past years, but it would help to have an FY14 here.
Become very clear.
And, you know, having an FY14 shows where those incremental things are and why that 12% doesn't all go into fund balance. And Kristen and I might ask for more detail than what's on here, but at a minimum, this one here,
Yes.
page 11, I think FY14 would help. May help on these others,
You will
too.
have that in the final memorandum.
Okay.
We have fiscal year 14 listed out for you when we need to really delve into it.
Okay.
Once we get it finalized for you.
And it helps explain the lump.
Yes,
That goes to my question about smoothing out.
And Mike, we were thinking about coming back maybe on December 10th, giving our council one more shot before the holidays, and then we'd have it back on in early January. So you'll have multiple opportunities at work sessions leading up to adoption in late February.
And for me, I don't mind that 12%. My concern is we're doing 12% to drastically change course when, and clearly exceeding in the out years that required amount, when without 14, I'm not certain that we need that abrupt, drastic change in course right out of the gate.
Could you also give us the metric for what, you know, like when you do a GO bond, the rating agencies ask for a bunch of metrics, you know? Could you give us those for the, you know, like, you know, percent of revenues and things like that? That it's not quite the same maybe for yours, but, you know, why that reserve works and what the typical rating agency percent would look for.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sure.
Michelle's back there taking notes for us also, so.
Okay, well.
She'll be a major part of this too.
Just trying to get a feel for where we are with this stuff.
Yes, sir.
And I have two other questions, I guess, and they relate to what I'll refer to as sort of the staff memo, which is, you know, a lot more verbiage section. But the first question is on, I don't know, I guess it's page 5. We had significant discussion about this back, I guess, in April. The carrying cost, and back in April we were, I think, at about $2.5 million for water and sewer debt carrying cost, which has a negative impact on our, you know, our balance fiscally. And clearly we've dropped. We went from about $2.5 million down to about $1.6 million. So we have done better at collections
Right.
since that time, and so that should be recognized. I think in that effort, while it will not resolve the projected out years shortfall and change dramatically the projected increase percentages unless we were to become much more aggressive than we currently are, but I think that we need to move forward or take steps to address the what I will call the 90-plus days or a quarter behind, because that's still about $250,000 in carrying costs that we carry for more than a 3-month period at a time. And so I think that we need to continue to work at moving those accounts and
for my understanding on that, true carrying charges are interest charges on borrowed funds. So we're considering the debt that we carry for the uncollectibles as our carrying charge, correct? That's how we're looking at that in the discussions we're having?
okay?
Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Like our conversation before, that was
right,
a bit
so
complicated.
should we, and we can capture those carrying costs by building it into base rate and socializing it across all the rate classes. And what Scott and we've done, what the council has allowed us to do is with our late fee charges, which we're just now
Right.
hopefully going to see a benefit of that. So in 6 months, we should see a great amount of movement and a reduction in our carrying
And we are.
charges. And we're seeing it
Yeah.
now. And Scott, I know, is here. He has forwarded a lot of that loan debt for collection,
Yeah,
correct?
but this fluctuation of going up to 3 and then down to 1.5
Understood.
is got to be difficult for budgetary purposes, especially in an environment where your utility is cash strapped for those capital projects and when to pull the trigger on them. So
It most certainly is. We agree.
the only other point I would make is a point that I made before, and one that I think we need to explore as a body as it relates to these charges, is those vacant properties and how we treat vacated properties, especially those properties that are vacated and go back into mortgage lender ownership, and looking at if those entities aren't going to pay that service, are not going to take ownership of that property, and we're going to bill a customer where that customer no longer exists because they've moved on, they've been foreclosed on, what have you, we need to remove that tap, if you will, and that lending entity needs to understand it's going to have to buy that tap back. In other words, if they're not going to take responsibility for the property in which they lent and have now foreclosed on, then they need to understand if payment isn't going to be made, we remove that tap and they can buy that tap back when the ensuing sale of the property
With
occurs.
an allocation
Yes.
charge and a new tap fee.
Yeah.
And we had some discussion on this earlier for how we actually capture those two true costs. Should we just move forward and continue to bill them the fixed fee even if the meter is removed, since it
Well,
is an asset in the ground?
Well, I thought that you have to or you cannot collect. Or you can't not bill and then not collect.
Correct, we would have to bill in order to collect. but-
That is my thought process, because I think it has an impact on the structure in which you fund the utility and the impact it has on your overall rate base.
And we'll try to give you a dollar amount on what that actually is. We can do a calculation on that to let you know for the ones that we have removed the meters. And once again, from our earlier discussion, the reasoning behind our movement of that was basically protection of the system and just trying to stop the flow of any further lost revenue to those
Understand.
locations. But yes, we'll definitely give you some more information on it.
And
We'll also
Go
have
ahead.
to, with the suggestion that they buy back that service, we would have to look at the benefit fee policy, because the benefit fee policy
Understand.
says the allocation goes with the property, not with the person.
yeah. And the very last thing is, I know that we operate on some degree of a declining scale on the water side. And in your memo, page 3, you note the impact of the treatment of high-strength sewage on the sewer system, and the sewer system obviously the one that is more impacted fund-wise. So just a curiosity in reading that, does a sewer customer, a high-volume sewer customer, receive the same level of benefit from that fee scale on the sewer side that they do from the water side? In other words, if I'm a big user, heavy user, do I receive the same type of declining scale on the sewer side that I receive on the water side? Okay, I didn't know the answer.
No, sir.
Yeah.
It's all-
Otherwise, it would seem like we're sort of doubly
Yeah, we don't have that.
hurting ourselves.
You'd be
Okay.
hard pressed to do that because legally, as part of the Clean Water Act, you have to charge the same for the same volume and strength of sewage. So you generally can't do a declining block on a sewer rate.
We also have the pretreatment program for
Yeah.
those users that send
Okay.
a high strength
Require
where they
them to
pay the
make it domestic.
difference.
All right.
Yeah.
Plus we bill industrial, you know, those big customer for sewer, we bill them separately for miscellaneous revenue for those.
Okay, I have a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
I'm done.
Tell me what goes into the city's projected water sewer sales? I mean, what factors go into the sales? Loud, a little loud so I can hear you, please.
The rates are based on our ability to collect our operating revenues. So it's everything that goes into running the plant, from chemicals to utility bills to personnel to debt service. That all makes up our operating budget, and that's what makes up the base for the rates.
Okay, I assume that inflation plays some role in that?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry,
Yes.
population. Does the expected increase in population or that perhaps doesn't come about play a role in that?
Absolutely, because our projections, as Nellie spoke before, in our previous 5-year, we did either a 1.5% or 2% projection in growth, and we didn't see that. That's why we've lowered it and kept it flat at 0.5% for consumption and for customer growth both this time, which of course helps lower the rates and keep them down a little more. So we've been more conservative this approach.
Okay.
This 5-year, yes, sir.
Okay, the door was open a couple of minutes ago for penalties, clearly based on the newspaper articles that were appeared recently. There's something wrong with the way the penalties are being assessed. I hope that we can figure out a way to solve that problem.
We have done some massaging of the length of time, the 21 versus the 30 days. You know, any new process has its growing pains. Scott and his group have done an excellent job of getting the questions answered to the individuals and working with all the customers. Neil, you, Nancy, we all receive calls and have you know, worked with every customer that we've gotten a hold of, explained to them what's going on. We understand that it's tough for some. It's a different way for them to think how they've paid their bill to us.
Sure.
Once again, we're the last bastion of any utility that doesn't charge a late fee. I mean, Cablevision, telephone, so everybody's already attuned, knowing they have to pay their bills on time to them or they get a notice. Now, I think it might have scared some of them, of course, when they go for the late fee after 21 days, they're getting a term notice also. I mean, that generates on our system. So I think that might have given them some undue stress. Basically, work with them, do everything we can to try to get them paid on time. We knew we'd have growing pains. This is, you know, it's finally come to fruition to them. A learning experience. It's going to take probably a quarter or two to get it smoothed out for everyone for the understanding. But once again, everybody's doing the best they can to get the information
So that
out.
anybody that has a problem and comes to you is going to get some kind of assistance.
They're going to either receive
In terms
assistance.
of terms of a payment date.
There's we're seeing two different scenarios. We have one customer group that comes to us and says, I'm not going to pay my bill on time. I recognize I'm going to pay a late fee. I just want to make sure my water doesn't get turned off. We have that customer.
Okay.
And I've heard as much or more of that philosophy than the other. So what we do is we note the account, so they let us know when they're going to pay it so that the water doesn't get turned off in that time period. So essentially, they acknowledge they're going to pay the late fee, and we acknowledge that we're not going to turn the water off. And then we have the other customer, and what we were dealing with was that 21-day window. So as long as their bill was paid within the 30-day window, we would waive that late fee.
Consistently for the next 20 years.
Well, no, we've actually changed the way we assess it. So they're essentially, one of the things we can tell the customer now is city code says your bill is due on day 20. We're allowing essentially a 9 to 10 day grace period already into your bill. So you have a net 30, which is pretty much an industry standard on bills.
We didn't feel we were unreasonable when making that move to assist the customers.
So really, that change only occurred with 3 billing divisions, the first 3 that went out that had the late fees assessed. So that group of customers that are paying in the net 30, those are where the adjustments are primarily occurring. If there is a billing dispute associated with a water line leak, a high bill, we also waive the late fee for that because we don't have time to work through the billing dispute with the customer. So we have those 2 primary scenarios going on, and then we have the one, which is what I call a special condition, a leak or a potential leak in a high water bill where we have to look at the functionality of the meter and also verify what's going on, at that setting. Is there a leak, and is the meter working properly?
Okay, let me just give you one example, and I would like to hear your response. There's a 65-year-old man who gets his Social Security on the 17th of the month, and he has it automatically deposited in his checking account. The man's going to live until he's 85, but his bill, the 21st day is up on the 17th of the month, and this guy's going to be forever on that same cycle. This person will be recognized as having the ability to pay his bill with no late fee.
It's a net 30, so he's always going to receive a bill and a check
Okay.
in that 30-day period.
Okay.
The net 20, that gets difficult, and that's, with the net 30, there should never be an issue.
And the other aspect of that is we only bill quarterly, so if they're receiving monthly checks, they've got an opportunity to put a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and make up for that in that amount of time. That should be of great assistance to them.
3 months.
They got 3 months to do it.
Yeah, well, when you're on Social Security and not much else, it's sometimes difficult. Okay, one final. I guess it depends on where you sit as to whether or not 12% means a lot to you. And I'm going to use myself as a source of the question here. My major source of income is based on retirement I get from the Maryland Senate, from the Maryland General Assembly. That particular system hasn't had an increase in 11 years this year. So 12% means a little something. Now, what does this chart look like if you just go 4% across the board the whole way out? I mean, what's it look like in terms of keeping the system solvent?
Well, that's the problem. It won't be solvent in the first 3 years. In 15, 16, 17, you will have to get a loan from somebody else, from the general fund or from water or from somewhere else to make it solvent. That's the problem. I mean,
If you do not go with the 12%,
Right.
you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Or is there any scenario by which the 12% can be reduced and not have to essentially borrow money or take it from somebody else, something else?
I mean, it is a zero-sum game, so we would have to, if you don't borrow money from somewhere else, you'd have to reduce costs in 15 to not have to have the 12%. Or if you can go find a bottler to come in and increase your sales substantially, there's really it's growth in customers, it's changes in the rates, or it's reduction in costs. So really your three key variables there. The end result is, there's really not a lot of opportunity to reduce that 12% in the first year without reducing costs.
So the scenario is this or borrow money. Okay.
Yeah, and so I can get my plug in for utility number 3. We all know what the Hagerstown Light Department does for the city and the rate decreases that we've seen over the last 3 years and will continue into fiscal year 14. And we've gone from $71 a megawatt hour down to $53.90 in the out year. So we're looking at a great savings to our customers.
Right.
And electrical users are typically, their bills a little bit more than their water and wastewater usage per month. So, when we look at the big picture for the utilities, we certainly would pray that they would take that into account, and hopefully some of that savings, if they did budget in the out years, could be applied to this 12%, because it is a modest increase for us on that.
Okay, and with regard to that, let me thank your department and congratulate your department on the good piece of work they did. I guess it was Sunday night when the wind blew through here and knocked off the electricity. My electricity was out for 2 hours, but it could have been out for 10 hours.
Yes, sir.
And these guys got out in the cold, the wee hours of the morning, and did whatever it took to turn the electricity back on, and we're grateful for that. Thank you.
I'll pass that on, yes, sir.
Please. Thank you.
Appreciate the presentation. This will be back before us, so I encourage council members in the intervening time to contact the staff and get clarifying questions or anything they can prepare for the next time they come before us.
We'll put together the graphs that's been requested of us so you can look and see the differences in the other groups.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all very
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate it.
Next up, we're going to hear about the history of Hagerstown Community College. Joining us is Dr. Guy Altieri, the president of the college, and Mr. Austin Abraham, the Board of Trustees chair. Is that correct?
Not chair, but Board of Trustees.
On the Board of Trustees. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you all know more about water and sewer than you ever wanted to?
It takes me back. Talk about history. Talk about history. It takes me back to my history.
That's where it used to be, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and because I have the longer history here than Dr. Altieri has with the college, I get to start this evening. Council, Mayor, it certainly is a privilege for us to be here. Thank you for providing us some time this afternoon to meet with you. Guy Altieri is the third president of the college in its 67 years of history, and I'm very pleased that he could be here this evening as well. We're here to talk a little bit about the history of the college. In 1946, Hagerstown Junior College, as it was known then, was formed as one of the first two community colleges in the state. It started out with a handful of students and a few faculty and a vision for what its role might be in the community. And as many of you know, was located in the basement of the old Hagerstown High School. That's where it all started. Many of the students in the first few years were returning veterans from World War II who were seeking job skills and professional skills. The college has grown since those first days to where we now have 7,000 credit students a year that come through our doors, and just about 9,000 non-credit students each year on the campus. And we serve people of almost every age bracket. You may be interested to know that of the county's college-bound graduates from our high schools, almost 80% will take some college credits at HCC. And many will complete 1 or 2 year programs at the college. In addition to that, over 700 high school students take college courses on our campus and in their high schools while they are still high school students. There's a lot that could be said about the community's college, but at this point I'll turn things to Dr. Altieri for his comments and also for the special presentation that we have for you this evening.
It's absolutely terrific being with all of you this evening. We come bearing a gift, the history of Hagerstown Community College. It's a wonderful history. We're very proud to put the Hagerstown name on the college. There are actually 15 Washington County community colleges in the country, but only one Hagerstown Community College in the country. We think that, of course, is very, very special. 1,200 community colleges across the country, and we're very proud of the fact that we were the first in Maryland. Started September 18th, 1946, and that first group was primarily World War II veterans, and they were extremely proud to be able to get post-secondary education in our community, and the college has grown over time. I'm going to ask Trustee Abram to pass out copies of the history, because it's not only a great story to read as you read about the journey over the last 67 years, but it really is an intensely researched scholarly document. There are well over 1,000 footnotes included in this document. Dr. Diane Weaver was the primary author. She has a PhD in Maryland history from the University of Maryland. She worked for the State Department of Education. She worked for the community college for years. She lived in our county for many, many years. And our challenge to her was to follow the development of the college along with the development of our community over the last 7 decades. If you turn to the pages that are numbered Roman numeral 10 and 11, you can actually see the way the chapters are titled. There are 7 chapters covering the 7 decades of the community college. And we start off in the 1940s, and we talk about getting the college started. Many of you are familiar with Superintendent Brish and his contributions in the community, but it really was Benjamin Willis who started the whole idea of getting the community college up and running, and he was involved in the project for its first year, and then William Brish took over, and I think most of you know Atlee Kepler was an employee of the Board of Education as a counselor. The college in its early years fell under the authority of the Board of Ed. The Board of Ed got the college started, and as the college grew in numbers and strength, I think you all know the history of going from Hagerstown High School to South High and to the building of what was called the Cracker Box there, an actual addition, and then finally our own campus on Robinwood. It's been a terrific history. R. Paul Smith, very, very much involved. I think many of you are going to enjoy reading the chapters on the 40s, 50s, and 60s. You will recognize hundreds and hundreds of names of people in our community. We've embedded vignettes throughout the document. We've embedded special interest stories. Dr. Richard Harrison was part of our first graduating class. He married Lois Smith, Paul Smith's daughter, who was the first registrar at the college, and she was responsible for rounding up that first class, and she found her husband on campus. The stories go on, and you'll find these sidebars that talk about the history of the college, our success with academics, our success with athletics, our interface with political leaders in the community. I'm sure you're going to enjoy reading it. Obviously, the early years, we were still supported heavily by Fairchild, and many of you know they had as many as 8,000 employees in our community. And right after World War II, as they were sort of part of the shift from a wartime economy to a peacetime economy, the transition from Fairchild to Mack trucks coming into the community, all of that is also embedded into the story of the college. So we have the story of the nation, we have the story of Maryland, and we have the story of Hagerstown Community College, all embedded. I think you're going to find it a terrific read. I am so pleased we were able to get this accomplished. I think it's a great contribution to the history of our county. And I know in the 12 years that I've been president of HCC, our ability to serve the community more and more has been, quite frankly, a labor of love for me. We have doubled our enrollments in the time I've been here, and more importantly, we've tripled the number of graduates who complete degrees and certificates from the college. And as most of you know, we're extremely diversified. We were very pleased to partner with the chief and the sheriff in getting a credit-bearing police academy up and running on campus. We continue to do wonderful things with cybersecurity. We're working with Johns Hopkins to bring them to our campus to engage in some local research. We're working with the energy industry on wind and solar and geothermal curriculum development. Biotechnology continues to provide terrific opportunities for students who earn that very difficult associate degree in biotech, with opportunities at Fort Detrick and other places. And we're not forgetting about the importance of the health occupations and continuing to do a terrific job in spreading out to all the major technical support areas in nursing and allied health. Business and computer science continues to be strong, and we're very, very proud of the work we're doing in the arts. Next fall, we should be seeing somewhere between 50 and 20 of the graduates from the Barbara Ingram School continuing at HCC, studying music and dance and drama. So the points of interface continue to be extraordinary, and we're very, very pleased to serve the community. And I hope all of you, as you find the time to read some of these chapters, will feel the pride that we all feel for the service we provide the community. So we know you have a busy schedule. We just wanted a few minutes to come by and share the history with you. And we want to thank you for your continued support for the college and its growth in the community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. Just one quick question. I know that the legislature passed a bill last year that basically said high school students could take up to 4 community college classes, tuition-free. Have you seen an increase in the number of students this year high school students taking the college classes?
Well, it's not completely tuition-free. It does entail substantial discounts that the college has to provide. We have, for the last 9 years, had our Essence program up and running, which is a 50% discount for up to 12 credits. So it's really up to those 4 courses. The new legislation actually has the Board of Ed picking up some of the cost, 10% of the cost. And for the farm students, the free and reduced meal students, the Board of Ed has to pick up most of the tuition for those students in the first 4 courses. So our numbers are going up, and I think many of you have heard about the STEM middle college. A middle college is really having high school students on a community college campus full-time. Our pilot this year has 12 students who will graduate with an associate degree and a high school diploma at the same time. We hope to increase that to 50 or 60 students next year and eventually get up to 200 students a year who would be coming to us as juniors and taking college coursework their junior and senior year. Much of that college coursework will concurrently meet high school graduation requirements. So the college English will meet senior English requirements, for example, and those students will be able to graduate at 16, 17 years of age with an associate degree and be able to move on with their lives. So we're very excited about that. We're giving that a STEM focus: science, technology, engineering, math, and medicine. So the STEM Middle College has 2 M's, one for math and one for medicine, so that those students also have opportunities in nursing and allied health. And that is really going to be exciting. Dr. Wilcox and I have worked very hard on this project. We got a $400,000 grant from the governor. We got $600,000 from the federal government to support that project. So we have seed money of about $1 million coming from outside our county to get that effort up and running. We continue to do very, very well with grant money. from the National Science Foundation and other groups, which is, I think, absolutely terrific, because we're bringing external dollars into our community to provide wonderful opportunities for our young people, and the college's reputation continues to be excellent. I know Councilman Munson, in his time in Annapolis, was always very proud of HCC and the way we were respected, and we appreciate all of his support during those years as we worked very hard to get the community college funding model at the state level designed in a manner that was not biased against the counties that had lesser means than the richer counties in our state. And that CADE funding formula does support growth in numbers, and that's helped us out considerably as well. So we know these are challenging times. We know education is the answer for a lot of families in our community, and we want to continue to do good things for good people, keep the open door open, keep our tuition as low as we possibly can, and really provide for those jobs of the future.
Keep up the excellent work. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Please, Mr. Munson.
I'll never, ever have a chance to say this again, so I just want to make a couple of comments if I could. First, you have played a very active role in getting students downtown Hagerstown, and if you could just comment on that for a second.
Yeah,
because that's very important to us, of course.
Absolutely. The partnership with USM Hagerstown continues to be extremely strong. I serve on the board of advisors, and although we stole Dave Warner away from USM Hagerstown, he knows USM Hagerstown extremely well, and he's serving as our chief academic officer, and he's working very closely with Mark on the articulation agreements that we continue to work through with USM Hagerstown and build that stream of students who graduate from HCC and continue their studies downtown. And that's going well.
Keep them coming, please. Guy, I wanted to thank you. For the 12 years that you've been here, we worked closely together.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed, the governors, every governor that I was associated with gave me the ultimate right to appoint the board members. And we worked together closely on that. And the board at the community college has always been extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
And you have made a real difference at that college. The fastest growing college in Maryland.
Yep.
For a long time. And it is an institution that we're incredibly proud of. And indeed, one of the people that I appointed as a senator was Austin.
Mm-hmm.
Right out of the blue, right? No one expected him to be appointed. And he's done a great job.
He's up for renewal. Did you know that? So if you still have friends in the governor's office, we got to let them know.
Well, you know, I saw Austin working for the city of Hagerstown. There was a time when there was a civil war between what towns? What was it?
Boonesboro and Keedysville.
That's right. And you went down there and you ended the Civil War and got that god-awful situation straightened out. And I knew that you'd be a good board member. But I do have to correct one thing. Now, all the classes at the Hagerstown Junior College were not taught in the basement. When I was a senior, I couldn't take trigonometry in high school, either because it wasn't offered or because of a schedule conflict. I can't remember. So I wanted trigonometry, so I had to take it at the community college. And it was taught on the top floor by a professor by the name of Hugh Bell. And Dr. Bell was actually almost blind, but he was an extraordinary teacher. And I learned a lot of trigonometry from Dr. Bell. And we have been very fortunate in the educational opportunities that the community college has provided to us. And thank you for continuing that tradition, and the community really appreciates it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the
very
book,
much.
too.
Indeed,
Okay,
thank you for the
very
book.
good.
Enjoy the
Thank you.
read. There will be no test.
All right, great, even better.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks again. Next up is our Hub City 100 miler. I expect every council member to participate in this.
Mike?
Yeah, you can bike.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am Amy Riley with the Parks and Recreation Department. This is my first time in the hot seat. I'm kidding.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
We'll try to make it not so hot.
I was joking, but thank you. I'm here to talk about a new program that we're launching in late November. It's called the Hub City 100 Miler. It's a community challenge for the community to complete 100 miles in 100 days. It will also be used as a marketing tool to promote our department, introducing the community to our numerous parks, our trails, and our recreational facilities. So we are asking the mayor and council to get behind the effort to endorse it and possibly participate in the effort. Again, it's a community challenge, which is 100 miles in 100 days, and will aim to inspire and motivate people to become active through various forms of physical activity, especially in the winter months when we seem to become idle. Any community member is welcome to join the movement. You're encouraged to reach your miles by whatever means of physical activities suits them. You will complete your miles in their own personal styles, from walking to running, golfing but walking, not riding a cart, skiing, possibly skateboarding, a fitness class. Basically, 20 minutes of continuous movement will equal 1 mile. So you can simply gain a mile by walking or running, or moving your body for 20 minutes. We will have a log sheet available via our website that you can track your miles. We'll be offering weekly prize incentives as a way to make it through the program to complete 100 miles. We'll be calling on local businesses to donate prizes, which we've already talked to a few. We have gift cards coming. Hub City Cycles is working with us to donate a prize, and a trek bike, which will be the grand prize at the end. We also have a sponsor secured with US Cellular, who will help offset some of the costs associated with running the program. And we will kick off the program on January 6th at Fairgrounds Park, so we invite everyone to participate in the kickoff. We'd like to walk the first mile with the mayor. And we will, again, continue the program for 14 weeks. Parks and Rec will serve as the virtual coach to offer, again, incentives, the prizes, ideas for how to complete their miles. We want to, again, introduce different trails and different ways of, learning about the city of Hagerstown and all that we have to offer. So again, we hope that you will help us endorse the program and get behind it, and we're really excited to be able to offer something new.
Great work.
And I actually have a flyer that I should have passed out before I started, so if
I'm
you want
looking
to
forward to it.
take one and pass it around.
It's a rain, snow, sleet, or shine event, right?
Exactly.
So if it's snowing on January 6th, bring your cross-country skis.
There you
20
go.
minutes worth of shoveling.
There, shoveling, does that count?
It does, 20 minutes.
That's great.
If you use a skateboard, it does have to be a busted board, doesn't it?
There you go, yes.
I want to make sure.
Excellent. Thanks for your
Okay,
work
thank
on
you.
this. This is
Sure.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Next up is the program open space proposed projects for FY 2015.
I think all of you are familiar with the program Open Space Program. It's a program that funds recreation and parks facilities. Every year we get a request together to bring into the mayor and council to approve the list. And tonight we have a potential list here for you to review. It has to be down to the state by the middle of December, so if you want to tweak it, that's fine. What Junior and I have put together is the list of 5 projects there. And priority matters in this too, so think about that, because if we don't get all the funding that we ask for, the top project will be funded, but the bottom project may not be, for example. So what we have in here is Kiwanis Park access, which is, Kiwanis Park is out off of Eastern Boulevard. That's basically the work in the floodplain, the paths, the access to the creek, benches in City Park. This is additional seating at the band shell in City Park number 3. That would be like a phase 2. The only thing I would mention though is if it stays on the list it won't get built in 2014, it'll be built in 2015, because this money won't be available to us until about next year at this time. Community garden, and maybe Mary, you want to say a little bit more about that, and then potentially some outdoor gym equipment at Fairgrounds Park, which we've had a growing interest in having some of that in our community. So we can talk about that in a second. I did want to note that we did have some extra POS money this year where we thought we were going to use it for the dog park, but the dog park was well-funded by the community and through different things. So we, that's paid for, basically. So we have $22,500 that we're suggesting that we use for outdoor equipment at the fairgrounds. Outdoor equipment used to be like chin-up bars and those kind of things, but now it's like legitimate equipment. And as you're walking around the loop out there, people could actually use this equipment. It's lifting, pushing, it's just standard equipment like you would see inside a gym, except it's made for outside. So that's our proposal, but we'd be happy to hear whatever changes you'd like to make.
Rodney, this is a good proposal. I agree with it, except this is next summer is the 100th anniversary of the municipal band. And if the seating could be, the new seating there could be moved up, I think that would be helpful.
Okay. The only way I would say that we could do that is if we fund that as a city, because I think the POS has already been, this POS money won't be available till next year.
Well, maybe there's some way you can work that around.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that seating the same, more of the same?
More of the same is what's being proposed.
How many?
Additional 2 or 3 rows.
It's very popular. The seating is very popular.
Some questions. You have 200, I've already asked Junior for some backup on what the overall totals were and what allocation we have, so I won't ask about that now. I do know that there's charts that show.
Is your mic on?
How it's been allocated countywide. How it's been I'm asking how it's been allocated countywide, and Junior's going to get us that information. So I won't go into it because I don't have it. But I do have a question about the out years. We're showing estimated cost in POS funds for 2016 of $670,000. When this year we have 225, and I think 14 was around that amount. We're showing 2017, we're showing 830,000. And we're showing most of that being funded by POS, you know. 2018, just 200,000, but then going to 500,000 in 19 and, you know, 8.5 million in 2020. Just wondered, do we have inside information on an increase in POS funds, or?
That's why it's called a wish list, Marty.
Well, I know, but.
I guess that goes back to more historical values, you know, a few
Yeah.
100,000.
Okay, well, I'll have more thoughts on that when I see what the allocations have been. In fact, if you get that for the last couple of years, because I used to get that every year. And
I will.
You know which chart I'm talking about?
I do.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Alshire?
A couple of questions, maybe just some simple statements of opposition. Are the band shell seating proposals, are they within the existing area where the previous seating was located, or are you talking about expanding it out further?
I would say it's pretty much the area that was, had benches before. What the proposal is to, what we built last spring would be to add another row or 2 behind what was already built.
Wait a minute, you said 2 or 3?
3, yes.
So is that to add rows because there are people sitting on the ground out there?
The benches appear to be very popular.
I know they're popular, but are they full?
Yeah, yeah.
And it doesn't expand in an area where people can bring their chairs?
No, there'd still be, I think, room behind that where people could bring chairs, blankets, whatever, and the hill rises
You
up
think, or there
nicely.
will be?
There will be.
Okay. I just don't want to, I'm not in favor of the concreting of the area to begin with. But the second thing is, there are people that like to come there and sit in a more natural setting. And I would hate to see us expand benches the whole way to the main lane that goes up to the mansion house. Which is
No,
my
it's
2
not even
cents.
close to that far.
Okay.
But people do sit clear back that far.
I've had a fair amount of complaints because there aren't enough of the new seating at this point, so it'll be used.
The second is I'm opposed to item number 4. So the community garden sounds great, but I think has shown to turn into something that we end up either taking over, one person ends up doing it, or it turns into a weed garden that our Parks and Rec staff have to go out and Public Works staff have to go out and clean up and turn back into something else. Sounds great on paper, sounds really cool and looks really neat in commercials, but I think in practical terms, I haven't seen it been a great success anywhere that I'm familiar with. Just my 2 cents.
Well,
I think it could have been.
Well, and I think what I did,
good
because
success.
this was at my request, not necessarily the funding request, but I've asked staff to, I've done my homework, talked with a bunch of folks who've been involved in these initiatives in the past, and I think we've identified reasons why they aren't successful, which is you can have a big plot of land and have a group of 20 people and say, oh, this is our community garden, but everybody's responsible for the whole plot, and I think that's the kind of thing that fails. The successful models, and I know staff have researched this too, that individuals will have a certain designated plot that they're responsible for, and there may even be a nominal fee involved in that to cover some of the costs that are involved, which more than likely will compel people to take responsibility for that. So I think what we're in the process of doing now is putting out a survey to generate interest and to gauge what kind of interest is in the community, and then we'll move forward based on that data that we have in structuring the program. And it would be starting out with a model garden, and then working, if it is successful, then you could expand it to different areas. So.
Understand, appreciate the comments, I'm still opposed. So
No worries.
That's just me.
How much did the first one cost us?
That wasn't the first one. And you've had several iterations of this.
I'm talking about the one that I know of.
Tiger Park,
Yeah,
probably had about 15.
okay. And it went bye-bye, so hopefully whatever does work, it works this time. Because that's a lot of money. And for honestly, the majority ended up in vegetables that just was not utilized. And I think one person that was actually taking care of it. And do we have a proposal where it's going to go, if it happens?
There's a number of locations. It's being, one of the items on the survey is to find out where people would like to see one. But there are a few locations that we're already looking at, mostly on city-owned property.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, but I was just wondering as to where. It's also nice to see visibility when this is happening, and that it's not a,
I think one of the top sites on the list was a lot, I think across from Bester Elementary School, in between a couple buildings, I think it is, right there across from Bester, maybe up the street a little bit, but there's basically a lot that's owned by the city that is not being used.
the one that was supposed to, across from Bester, no, that was the Gardens, no.
Not Memorial
Where?
Park, but then you
Right.
can back up towards the downtown. There's a couple buildings, then there's a vacant lot that
Okay.
that the city owns. So.
that's one possibility.
Right, among many.
I also don't see and I think this speaks to Marty's comment of, this is a wish list. I'm trying to be a bit more practical about it. CO 522, the parking improvements to the upper lot. Been there a million times. I don't see the need to pave that in any immediate future. I also don't understand the 2018. It looks like we're buying the playground area at Winter Street School. Is that right?
Just additional park, we're looking for additional park in the west of the town, or park space.
So we have to buy that?
We're not sure.
Yeah, I'd be opposed to having to buy that.
I think what we ought to seek is getting it from the board as a donation, and then that kind of money for doing
equipment.
improvements rather than calling it land acquisition. I mean, I agree with Kristen's comments. I
I don't think we should puts us in a position of seeming to have the money, and I don't think we do, because then we have to do something with it now.
And I'm also opposed to the Fairgrounds Sports and Events Center for $8.5 million at the fairgrounds. So, that's my comment.
Any other questions or comments?
And what was that going to be about? Yeah, I do. Wait. What was that?
That's the
Sports and
turning the
event?
grandstand into the community center.
Oh, I'm telling you, you just want to take that grandstand down, don't you? That's been on the hot seat for a long time.
Refurbish it.
No, it's the reverse. It's that plan. Is it that plan that you had about 6 years ago?
Is this the one taking the grandstand down and doing what you need?
No, it's
No.
actually enclosing it and making it an indoor center.
No, it's not taking.
And that, because what the proposal was years ago was actually using that seating to do concerts, which still could happen out there. And the talk is that, oh, we need to take that down. So we need to just take it down and we need to do whatever we need to do with it.
This isn't proposing taking it down, but it wouldn't be seating, it would be an indoor facility.
Correct. So we're still back to where we were. Am I correct, Junior? When we talked about it at the parks and it was taking down the seating that
It's making use of the
therefore,
structure there.
You know. Yeah.
It's way out there.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Oh,
The
one more question.
$22,000 from the dog park that was not being used, are you saying that's ours, that you put back?
It's POS money that's been allocated to the city, but we need to reallocate it to something else.
Okay, so why is it that we could not, since this here cannot take place because this money doesn't come in until when, that we can look at the park benches?
Right.
That's what they're
Because that's
doing with it, right?
27.
Oh, punt the park benches. They're doing playground equipment.
And that's what I would think too. I would think
Okay.
you use that money for the park benches and you turn around and use the POS money for.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I asked them.
You know,
I asked them. Usually I like to keep it in the same park, but I went.
We can see if we can do that.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments?
Junior,
Yes, sir.
you guys do amazing work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Penny, were you talking about the park benches and picnic tables or about the additional seating at the band shell?
No, the park benches, since that's the one that's the heavy, it's either or. It could
Okay,
be
well,
either
I
or.
was talking about the.
The band shell?
Yeah,
and
that's what I
fine.
thought
It
there
could
was a
be-
confusion.
It could
Thank
be
you.
either or.
I think we ought to do the band shell. I kind of agree.
All right, but now you still have to come up with another,
Right.
how much money? 22?
Maybe 8, 10, something like that.
Okay, so see, we're,
We're not quite there.
well, you know, I mean, where can we pull it from to do that? And I do understand that whole thought process because those seats, I can imagine, are.
Well, it'd be good to get them before next concert season, is what we're saying. If you guys can get it through the, yeah. It would just be a flip-flop, then you could do the other, what you were going to do next year. Yeah.
You go before the county again to ask that?
Right now, this list with the dog park money is at the state. The county's approved it already. It's at
Okay.
the state level, which
Okay.
we should be hearing something within the next month.
All right,
Yep.
okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Do you need action? Do you need the list approved? Do you need us to?
We'll put it on the
And
agenda.
I want to make it clear, the council's not approving a sports and event center for $8.5 million.
No, no.
Right.
That's just a wish list for the future. Well, I just want to make that absolutely clear. It's just a wish list, and if somehow there was a miracle with POS funds, that would,
What we do need to approve is the priority list for next year.
right,
Right.
right.
Okay, thank you. Moving right along is a proposed city park sculpture project. We have a lot of park-related items on our agenda tonight.
And we have a lot of partners here that we need to introduce, and some of them, their parents are going to be picking them up. So
Please.
I thought it might be
You two
good,
move on.
Rodney, if we could have the partners maybe stand, everybody that's
That'd be
part
great.
of this.
Yeah.
Want to go ahead and introduce everybody?
Well, first we have Judy Wheeler.
President of the Board of Advisors of the Washington County Museum of Fine Arts.
Thank you. Why don't we just do it this way?
I'm Mary Ann Burke, Director of the Washington County Arts Council, and we are the agency that received this grant that Rodney's going to tell you about.
I'm Dr. Teresa Roberts from Barbara Ingram School for the Arts, and these are some of my students who will be working on the project.
I'm Iris Wexler, and we will be helping with fundraising. Hi, I'm Darian. Hi, I'm Julia.
Principal Hovermel is taking the photos.
Sue Parker with the Board of Advisors of the Museum and the Valley Art Association.
Rebecca Massey-Lane, Director at the Art Museum, and we're very, very excited about this project that will be in the front of the museum in the lake.
I'm Amanda Miller. I'm an English professor at Hagerstown Community College, and I wrote the book to go along with the sculpture.
Hi, I'm Paul Reimer, and I'm a sculptor from Pointe Rocks, Maryland. Oh, sculptor of the bears, which you see the small maquette on the table there. Yeah.
Well, thank you all for being here and for being a part of this project. It's really exciting.
There's a lot we could say about it, but I think the memo is pretty straightforward on this. It is truly a partnership of a lot of different groups to try to bring some public art to our community. We have a model that you've seen. There's pictures of it, kind of a photoshopped image of it in your packet of what it would look like. We have a plan of how it would go together. I think the most important thing here, obviously, is the financing of it. We have a $5,000 grant that Mary Ann spoke about that she received through the Arts Council. We're requesting tonight $5,000 from the City of Hagerstown towards the sculpture. Karen's going to talk a little bit about fundraising, and then also the children's book that would go with the sculpture that would talk about, kind of gives you the lesson or a story behind the sculpture of $2,000 towards printing that so that it can be distributed for free to students in the community. So that's the proposal. Karen, you want to talk about fundraising?
And we have approximately $12,000 in private funding that we'll be going after. We'll create levels as we did for the dog park, as we do for events. And we'll be asking private donors to make those donations, and in return, they'll get a recognition level. One part of the fundraising that I don't want to go unmissed is the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts students. They're going to be doing a bucket campaign. So that means that these wonderful visual art students will be asking for coins from their fellow students, from other schools, and maybe from you. So if you're saving up, and so make sure you come to City Hall with the bucket as well. But we will be going out, so if people do want to donate, both individuals and corporate sponsors, we feel that this amount, we definitely will be able to make goal with that as well. And I think it's going to be an excellent project for the community. And I think both Mary Ann and Rebecca wanted to say a couple words.
Thank you. I just want to let you know that this is the first time that Washington County community has received such a grant from the State Arts Council since the inception of this public art project in 2008. There are 24 arts councils in Maryland, and only 3 were awarded dollars this year, and Washington County was awarded the maximum. So I think you needed to know that, and it's very exciting for us. We hope to apply year after year.
Great.
The museum is very pleased to be participating in this project, and the Board of Advisors is going to be taking the lead. We're going to be hosting a fundraising event, and Paul has generously offered a sculpture to raffle of a bear, so that will be part of it. And we're very hopeful that it will be, more than successful. I have to say that I think that embellishment in the city park will be a wonderful addition. As you probably know, people really enjoy promenading around the lake on that beautiful walkway, and this will be in a little inlet right in front of the museum in the water, and it will be beautifully sighted and accessible for photographs and for many memories to grow as they do around the museum already and in City Park. So I think it'll be a fantastic addition to our community. I'm so grateful to Rodney for coming into my office one day and saying, "What do you think about public sculpture?" Because I guess he knew already that I think a lot of public sculpture. So I'm very, very pleased about the project. Did you want Paul to speak?
I wanted to see if maybe Paul and Amanda wanted
I just wanted to say thank you for including me as a partner and part of the project. I'm real excited about the fact that the city would like to pursue public art as an artist. Obviously, that's something that makes me excited. But I think that if you're committing to show those kinds of those beautifications to your community, I just think it says a lot about you as a community, and I'm really happy to be considered as a partner for that. So thank you very much for your time.
I'm also very pleased to be a part of this project. I was thrilled to be asked to write the story to accompany the sculpture about the mama bear and her cub. When we think about stories allow us to draw meaning from what we see around us. So when we read fiction at any age, even when we're young like my two, when we read fiction, we decipher and internalize lessons. And then we use those lessons, we revisit those lessons as we try to make our own decisions. So by accompanying the statue with a story, we're encouraging viewers to create meaning out of the statue. And as we all know, the nature of teaching and learning has evolved quite a bit since it's no longer enough for us to learn a finite collection of data. Instead, in order to keep up with constant changes, we need to embrace the process of learning new skills, and we need to remain open to lifelong learning. So near the end of the book that I wrote to accompany the statue, not so little black bear tells his mother that now they both know everything about fishing, except for the things they will learn tomorrow and the next day and the next day. All around them, the sun caught the ripples in the water so that everything sparkled, both the wonders that the bears knew and the wonders that the bears didn't know quite yet. With your help, we can distribute the books to several thousand area kindergartners, along with related teaching activities for teachers and parents. In this way, the plan itself underscores the core themes of the statue and the book. Lifelong learning and teaching are crucial to self-sustainability. So thank you for your support.
Thank you.
And I think Dr.
And just to add a little bit to that, the educational aspect of this project is something that was part of the grant from the very beginning. And Paul has graciously agreed to allow the students at Barbara Ingram School for the Arts to come to his studio and to witness the process as he's making the sculpture for the park. So we're very excited about that opportunity, and part of that is the reason for our students wanting to be involved in the fundraising effort for the statue.
That's great.
So there's a lot of people excited about this, so that's our proposal, and do you have any questions or like to hear where you're at on that?
We accept.
It's
I'm
a
excited
wonderful,
about it also.
it's a wonderful, wonderful idea. And to take it a little bit further is to also incorporate whoever has the whole theme, is to put a lot of this into the store, into the museum, as far as adding on to, just showing what we do have. T-shirts, anything, always a trinket to be able to take along home. But it's beautiful, absolutely gorgeous.
Well, my wife and I raise money for books for newborns, and the $2,000 will not go very far to buy books. It doesn't seem. I would not suggest that we had any more. I would suggest, though, that the Board of Education, I think you should seek, to get more funds for the books, that the Board of Education ought to want to participate in this. And in fact, I think they should up the ante from what we're contributing. I don't know how much it is per book, but I know they can be pretty darn expensive.
2,000.
We did get some estimates. We got a couple estimates, and what we're thinking about for the books is to have black and white interior, which does make a big, big difference.
Yeah.
So the quotes that we had gotten were a little bit above 2,000, but I think with other fundraising efforts, we can certainly do it. We do need the funding from the city, though. We can fundraise a little bit, but we wouldn't be able to fundraise.
When you say 2,000, how many books does that buy?
That quote was for 5,000 books, which is
$2,000 plus 5,000 books?
for black and white interiors.
A color cover. And our next proposal, if we finish here, is to go
Well, whatever, I suggest you review that cost figure, because boy, they can be, okay. All right. $2,000 buys 5,000 books.
These are paperback books?
Yeah, okay. Well, anyhow,
32 pages.
that's very good if you have that quote. And, but again, yeah, the board, I think, would want to help more. And I think handing them out specific to like tours to the lake or something like that would be a good
What we're
idea.
asking is the books to print for distribution to kindergarten through grade 5.
Right.
I understand.
Well, if,
Over that would be
But I think that would give more context to the books, but, okay.
we could continue to look at that and maybe even some other print
It-
areas,
it-
and then we,
It would
whatever we
provide
need
a
to
lot more meaning
raise.
to the books and,
And I'm sorry, one of the other things, sorry, I think I'm probably loud enough that they can hear me, maybe. So the other thing we were thinking is, so we would distribute the books to the kindergartners along with lesson plans. So the lesson plans would go to the teachers, and we would also have ideas for parents, you know, kind of going along with that same theme. And then possibly inviting them to an unveiling of the statue in the fall, so we could have a big event that centers, you know, that really connects the statue with the book.
right, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah,
Ways the
and I
kids
think
would
that'd
get
be
the
great.
context and give pride to the city at the same time.
Right, yeah, and it could be probably a pretty well-attended event at the park.
Yeah,
do it during the Park Arts Festival if we can get things moving in.
we actually are creating a new festival that we're working on, and we'll unveil some of those plans at a later date.
Thank you.
But with all this, whatever the extra cost, we can go out and look and see if there's other people that would like to donate. Just call me and we'll get
Yeah.
you set up.
There are already some private donors who
I'm
have
calling you.
stepping in.
Right. I just think this would really tie in with the board's mission.
Okay.
So
Well,
we
this
okay
is
with the 5, or is it 7?
Yes.
In the memo, in the memo, it said 7.
Yes.
5 for the sculpture.
Oh, sure, and
and
2 for the
Yeah.
books.
So 7 total.
Yeah. The math didn't work at the memo at first until I realized the 2,000 was beyond the 22,000. The 2,000's on top of the
The
22,000.
sculpture itself is 20.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
That's where I got to the,
Great. Got 1 for 7, 2 for 7, 3 for 7. Marty, you're 4 for 7. Kristen? Sure. 5 for 7. We're good to go.
Kristen's really enthused, you know.
Thank
He
you
really
so
is.
much.
Kids are gonna love this.
kids will be down, they'll be climbing on the
Thank you for your
bear.
support.
I'm gonna
Thank
get a
you all
picture
very
of that.
much for this collaborative effort. Appreciate it.
Oh, great.
It's going to be a great improvement.
I know, what- you take it and I'll get it.
I'll sit up here before I knock it on the floor.
That's why I didn't take it, Ronnie.
And the next item on the agenda is the expansion of a cafe license for Greens and Grains.
Andrew
Welcome.
Sargent. Pietro is here with me, and the owner of Greens and Grains down in the northwest quadrant of the square. We have kind of a new type of request, I guess I'll say it here, about an outdoor tent in one of the cafes. So this is a new issue for us, so we felt like we needed to come in and review it with you. I think this body would have to approve it. So I think you want to make your proposal and talk about what you want to do there.
I want to thank you guys for allowing me to make this proposal. So I'm Pietro Priola, the owner of Greens and Grains, and one of the reasons why we're proposing this is because in Hagerstown, in order to get a beer and wine license, you have to have 75 seats. So and we've been going around with Andrew and talking about the other city council members and the mayor about this. But also, in order to get the 75 seats, and we do have outdoor seating at this time too, but we only have about 16 seats out there, is to get an all year round seating is to put a tent out there, a heated tent. There is a picture that we did a Photoshop with that shows the tent being in the outdoor area there. That would allow us to have about 50 seats out there. And that would also be in the summertime, the tent will be removed and we'll be having some planters and stuff like that in order to have secure for the service of food and alcohol beverages, basically just beer and wine.
How would the tents be anchored, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, there's logistic issues there that we really have to work through. We'd have to find a way. And I think, a building permit would probably be required so we'd be comfortable with that.
So this thing would have sides and be heated by space heaters?
It'd be heated by 80,000 BTU electric propane heater, yes.
Space heater.
Space heater, yes, which is sitting outside of the, it's an exterior itself. Because we met with the fire marshal on this, and we went through, and actually, I don't think that they have that in the packet. It's the,
don't have that
it's the
stuff.
layout. I think I have a few here. Okay, I made some copies. Just two. Yeah. There's three, there's two here.
Going once, going twice.
Yeah, when I met with the fire marshal, he indicated that he wanted to see a layout. I mean, this is just preliminary stuff that we're doing right now. They get a tent company to come out and measure it to see, in order to put the 50 seats, what size tent we would need. And basically, it's 15 by 30, but they don't have a 15 by 30, so it's two 15 by 15 tents, which just comes out to 15 by 30. And what I'm here also asking is for the recommendation, because from the city council to get to the next level and go to the liquor board about this, in order that they would allow the outdoor seating to be an all year-round seating to allow us to get just beer and wine.
I guess I should explain my presence here a little bit. What I find interesting about this is a downtown business who is finding ways to make his business more viable and successful. And what I think is interesting here is could set precedent a little bit as far as other areas where this could happen. Perhaps Bulls and Bears saw a need to tent their cafe area outside on their street for outside events during the winter, or other businesses that have cafe licenses. So this is kind of the first time this has been brought up. It's interesting. It could be potentially very beneficial to our downtown businesses.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Why two 15 by 15 tents and not a 15 by 30?
They don't make 15 by 30s.
That's simple answer.
Basically, yeah. So.
I also think it's probably cheaper to keep it heated if you only have 12 patrons in there. I mean, you're going to have 30 all the time.
Would you talk a little bit about what efforts you have made to work with your neighbors to get it inside place?
Yeah, I have talked to my neighbors. As you know, right there at the square, the business adjacent to me is a party rental place. And I have not really gotten any luck really talking to them about it. I've put the presentation to them. I've asked them to see if they could also help me to get the tents rented through them. And I really have not gotten a comeback on it. Now, there is a letter from Vickles that, we talked to Vickles about it, and they agreed that it would be a good addition to that square area. So, and plus, I'd like to add, too, is that, I'm very new in town. I've been there 3 months, coming up the end of this month. And prior to me, there's been 2 other cafes there. And I could see one of the reasons why they didn't make it. The wintertime. My sales went less than half in the last month.
I'm sorry, say it again.
My sales went less than half in the last month because there is no outdoor seating. And, people don't want to sit out there in the cold. So, because that's my primary seating. Inside, I have about 18 seats now, and meeting with the marshal, with the fire chief and the marshal, I guess, we took a look at it of, certain changes that have to be made inside. If I get the beer and wine granted, that we would, put like a little wine bar in there, which would be additional bar stools or stools in the, in the inside area. We'll have about 28 seats inside. And that's all we could get. We can't get no more than that. So.
Are the tents going to be see-through? They're not going to have?
Yes, they're going to
walls?
have see-through, they're going to have walls, but it's going to be clear all the way through on both sides. And lighting and some planters in the outside and, of course, the heaters and stuff like that.
I know you've touched on your neighbors in this picture here.
Yes.
If you could maybe explain a little bit what the feeling of this neighbor is on the tents.
I haven't gotten a feeling.
Because
we've asked.
Clearly, that's a storefront. And you know, a storefront has a certain presence within downtown to that storefront owner or proprietor. And you're putting basically 30 feet of blockage between.
It's actually 15 feet. It's only their first window. If you look at the, they have 3 windows. If you look at the actual courtyard drawing, it is the first set of windows that we're sort of blocking from them. They have 2 other sets of windows. So part of it is into like my storefront, and then part of it is in theirs. Yes.
So this isn't 30 feet here?
Yes, it is. That it is 30 feet. And part of it is into my area, and then that's the first, what is it? It also is a Photoshop drawing of it, so.
Well, this is, where's the brake line for that other store? That's what it shows.
I mean, I see yours here.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
But I see 30 feet of space.
Well, which is the first light pole.
Including this direct access here to this door. That's what I'm trying to figure out is this a separate a business right here?
It is a storage, it is a business. No, it is. It's all one business. That whole place next door to me is a party rental place.
But I guess what I'm trying to figure out is this a used egress?
Yes, it will still be a used egress without blocking that at all.
I mean, I don't have a huge issue, save for if there is a degree of opposition from a store owner whose line of sight, if you will, from the traveling public is detrimentally affected and impacted or negatively impacted by that.
Have city staff let that adjoining storefront owner know that they have 3 choices. They can say okay, they can say they oppose it, or they can continue being silent, and I would assume take silence as long as that notification is not opposing it. But I agree with Kristen.
I don't want to sit here and go, yeah, that sounds great.
No,
and
we
then
need
they come in and
to hear
"Geez,
it.
Pete, City Council, thanks for renting out,
I
3
agree.
car lengths worth of
I agree with
visibility.
you. And I went to them and, made the proposal, showed them.
Understood. That's why I think
Yeah,
we need
so-
to have
Did
staff
you
go there
also-
and say, you either make a response or we're going to accept silence, is not opposing it.
Did you also tell them that you would be coming to city council?
Yes.
Okay, well, you know what, that should have given them a clue.
I still think we need to.
I'm not
maybe have
saying
some-
that, but I'm saying that, with that, if they were concerned, then also.
I think,
think
though,
we need to
the
have
nature
staff.
of their business is not like a typical retail
No. It's not.
store.
They're never No.
open. Because it's more
Right.
of an office and a storage
Storage,
facility.
that's, I was going to add that.
Right.
That's what it basically is. There's no.
It's a warehouse, that's what it is.
But
Yeah.
we also have to think down the road, there could be another.
Somebody
business
else.
Want that site.
Correct.
In a very attractive business.
Sure.
Or whatever. It's too bad the antique store didn't make it, for instance,
Regarding to future for that location, I have made efforts to try to rent some of the space from them.
Yeah.
Yes, and with no luck. But also they have a 5-year lease. So what I.
Just hold on, you may get it.
Well, what I've said is I went to Demcor and I asked them for the first right of refusal, that if in case the space come available, I would like to take the whole space to basically expand the cafe into that area, into a restaurant.
Yeah.
And make it into a restaurant.
Just hang in there, okay?
So I'm hearing some tacit approval here, or?
I guess I have two thoughts. One is I really want to encourage somebody who energetically wants to expand business in Hagerstown. So that's good. I don't think we'll get any more tax from it because it's already on public property. But, so we'll have to think about that. But the other, so I want to congratulate you for working hard to improve your business, and especially if you can expand, into the existing building. But I do have a fear for, I know we have a right to cancel this arrangement. Is that correct? We would have a right to cancel this if it didn't turn out or if we weren't satisfied with the maintenance and so forth.
That's right.
Because we are setting a precedent for using the public square or public space this way, for a private business, and especially in the public square. I'm a little worried that we could get into things on the other corners of the square that weren't, I don't know, didn't set an appropriate tone or whatever. So I'm basically willing to try this and see where it goes, but I think I want to make it clear that it doesn't mandate that we have to approve anything, anywhere. It's just this unique circumstance. Somebody will come and say, you did that there, you have to do it here, and we don't. That needs to be clear. So I think we're probably willing to experiment, especially if the other owners there continue not to respond. So.
Any other questions, comments?
I don't have a question, I just have a statement. Pete, it's nice to have you on the square in Hagerstown. It's nice to have the square alive, at least that corner of it, because of you. I am unhappy because the other business is a warehouse business and essentially doesn't do any business. It doesn't attract people downtown. And I therefore support everything that you want to do, including the alcoholic beverage license to make it viable. Now, I am also under the impression that you have bigger plans for Hagerstown at some point. I mean, I've heard you discuss the possibility of maybe opening an Italian restaurant someday. And we'd be grateful if you would. So I think this is a good proposal. I think it has had a lot of thought. I don't really see any alternatives. I don't want you to go out of business because the weather's too bad. So I think this is it. And if these people who have this place that's always closed, I mean, my office is right across the street. I look over there several times a day, and it's always closed. There's hardly anyone ever there. I think you need to move forward, and I support you moving forward.
We want to see you hanging at the new tent, Don.
I'm sorry, what?
We want to see you hanging at the new tent.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, it looks like we have
So I think what we would
consensus
do,
here.
if the majority is in favor of this, we would put the cafe license expansion on the agenda for the voting session and approve that.
I didn't understand that to be the case. I understood we were going to contact those existing property owners.
Right, but that could be done within,
Okay.
it's conceivable that we could have an answer next week.
Yeah.
So if we get no answer or yes from them,
That's it.
you're okay moving ahead. If they say no, then I guess we have to revisit it.
Well, I guess if you find him at home.
Well, if they say no, I don't think it means that we're going to resent it. It's just, it gives us information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they say no, I'd like to know what their reasons are.
Yeah, what their reasons are and what their plans are,
I don't think they have even a sign, do they?
There is no signage. I even, when I met with them, I even proposed to put a sign up on the tent area, on the outside, closer to
Yeah.
the road where the tent would be. And I never got a comment from them on that. So.
How about if we have a problem with the owner of the building? It's another issue.
I don't think we really care about the owner of the
Well, I know that, but the thing is that he can also guide the ones that are renting from him. Do you get my point here?
I don't think he's
It doesn't
guiding
matter.
anything.
I think it's wonderful. So you know what? Go forward with it. Hopefully, you'll acquire one of these buildings.
Thank you.
Okay.
And you have some of the best.
And if anyone hasn't had the pear and gorgonzola salad, I highly recommend it.
We are adding flatbread pizza to the menu and also some hot stuff for the winter time.
Oh, that's great.
Some winter
Yeah.
stuff going.
You have some of the best hot chocolate in town, and you make it.
Now, I'll
Thank you.
compete with that, okay? Because I do good hot chocolate,
Well,
too.
you gotta buy it. You gotta buy it.
Okay?
Hot
And then you
chocolate throwdown on the
you can
square.
test mine,
Okay.
okay? You come to the city park for the tree lighting.
I will. Yes, absolutely.
Subcontract with her.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Pete.
Thank you.
Continuing with parks, we
Yeah,
have a parks
wide
rental
range of
agreement
subjects here tonight.
to look at.
First, before I go too far, I want to acknowledge the Parks and Rec staff. Emily Conrad is a part-time person in Parks and Rec that helps with a lot of the office and clerical issues that we deal with. She also helps at the Egger House. Of course, Amy and Junior, you know. But they've worked hard to take a comprehensive look at how we do park rentals, because more and more the city is getting asked to have events, to have opportunities for people to do rentals of our parks, to do fundraisers and all those kinds of things. These are all great things. But we just want to make sure that we're in step with what your expectations are for us. And we have some changes that maybe we would like to suggest. Maybe it's just raising an awareness of how we've been doing things and hear how you feel about some of those things. But there's a few things we want to put out here as kind of where we'd like to go forward, because we're also getting ready to do our operating budgets, so we need to start planning on, what kind of revenues we'll be seeing in the next year, and we think that we can do better on the revenue side in the Parks and Rec area. So I'm skipping down to number 3 in the memo, but there's a few things we are proposing. The first is that we'd like to have a little bit more comprehensive rate schedule for the parks. Specifically, what we're talking about there is Fairgrounds Park, City Park, University Plaza, and Pangbourne Park. Those are the ones that primarily people would want to rent from us. And then there's various facilities in those parks that we would rent, and these are the fees that we're proposing. There's not a lot of enormous changes there. There's a couple new ones. For example, when the Color Splash occurred in Fairgrounds Park, they basically shut down the whole park. We didn't really have a mechanism for dealing with that as far as renting that. So we can go over those in more detail if you'd like. A couple of the other things on here is the I'll just skip that word. What we would say is that when an event needs to occur, even if it's a very good fundraiser, we still need to charge these basic fees for them to rent the park. And the only time there would be exception to that would be if it's a city event, like Blues Fest and those kind of things. Private festivals, fundraisers, they'd still pay these fees, which are very competitive with all the research that these folks have done of other county and other places like that. We also would like to require that when people need Junior and the park staff time on the weekends, that we would begin to charge for that. Oftentimes, we've given those services away, and it runs up our overtime costs. It kind of wears the people out, I think. And we feel that, if somebody wants to have several parks folks at their event, that's fine, but they need to at least cover our costs on that. And then the last thing is the event support. We'd like to go out of the tent and table and chair business. And there's businesses out there that do that for a profit, and I think let them do it, and I think it protects our staff. So that's my introduction, but Junior is far more involved in this than I am, so feel free to say whatever.
No, I think you covered it very well, but yes, we're just not trying to make money, we're just trying to recoup our cost.
Right.
We want to break even.
Right.
I agree with Mayor,
Yeah.
and I think it fits with all the budget things that
Yeah.
we tried to do and that Kristen has tried to get us to do, which is at least pay for what we spend.
That's exactly right.
Softball fields, I do have a question. $15 for 4 hours. Now you have to rent it for a day, and that's your only option? $50 for a day?
Yes.
Why did we go from that? It seems to me people don't usually do it for 4 hours, or?
People normally don't do it for 4 hours, but then if you do rent it twice, the people have already messed up the field. And then the people come in the second time, once it's drug, once the line's took down, and who does that?
Okay.
There's nobody there to do it. If we
Right.
pay staff to do so,
Yeah.
$15 ain't gonna cover it.
So it's a day or else regardless. But what if the demand is there, you could supply it better by doing it twice a day?
Yeah, and the demand hasn't been there.
The demand's not
I
there?
don't think we've ever had anybody request a second time in a day.
Well, if you're not having it, then
Yeah.
I go along.
It's like the pavilions,
Yeah.
we used to do them twice a day, and nobody ever really wanted to do a half a day.
Right.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir. Mr. Alshire.
And I'll probably have to ask you some of these more directly, but under these user requirements, when I just had a couple of comments, and like I said, I may submit additional ones, but like the food, where it says user wishing to serve or sell food must contact health department, see which permits are required. I think what you meant there was serve or sell food to the public. And then like number 5, I think number 5 should be broken out, being as we've made some changes with the application of smoking within parks. I think it'd be better to break out alcohol and smoking into 2 separate points.
Kind of crammed that in there
Yeah.
together, and it's,
Number 7, I wouldn't use the word please. I mean, we have park hours, and I think that applicants need to abide by them. And then I'd be curious, under number 8, how many folks get caught within that 45-day period. That seems like an awful long time to call to cancel ahead of schedule. I'd be curious to see how many you have a year that, you know. And logistically, I'd be curious how an individual organization can rent out an entire park. I mean, to rent City Park in its totality just seems
City Park's a
odd.
little bit tougher than Fairgrounds. Fairgrounds, I mean, it happened in
Renting
September.
City Park for $1,000 for 6 hours just seems super cheap.
Well, I'm assuming that would just mean what they're running is all the pavilions.
All the pavilions, the
But-
boat show.
But it would not at all
Preclude
preclude
public.
anybody from using the park.
No.
Well, yeah, I mean, we got to clarify that somehow.
Yeah, and that's what I said.
I had a question along
Right, I
similar
think that
lines.
needs to be
How
clarified.
in the world can you rent out all of City Park, I mean,
think when we was
and
thinking about-
enforce it?
When we was talking about renting the park, I believe it was Fairground.
And maybe
It
we
wasn't
should
like
put
a
that in there.
city
I
park.
think we should
Yeah,
put that in there,
it
because I
needs to
can see
clarify
how
it somehow.
you can rent all Fairgrounds
Yeah.
Park. I can see that.
Because such as Color Splash was very good.
Right.
But, we couldn't have softball, soccer that morning. So
There just
we-
wasn't a park.
Right.
So we had to
Yeah.
shut down the park. But I think Fairground was what we was.
Yeah,
gearing
I think
towards.
we should,
So we'll take
we
the
should
city
agree
park
City
off.
Park shouldn't be an
Right.
option.
And I have a number of comments, but I'll send them to you.
Thank you.
So it sounds like we're on the right track.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Next item on the agenda is a land transfer for business expansion.
Don't need any action tonight, but we have another proposal here for you that we'd like for you to consider. Arnold Eby's here was with me, and also, I guess, the owner of Cafe del Sol. And Arnold's the owner of the center out off of Salem Avenue at Broad Fording Road. And Cafe del Sol wishes to expand. Problem is, the land that is available on that site is too small, basically, to provide the parking that they need as required by the zoning ordinance to expand the way he wants to. So the concept here would be that in the first exhibit, there's a hatched area in yellow that is completely owned by the Maryland State Highway Administration. They don't want it, they don't use it, they didn't even know they owned it, frankly. And some of the parking that they're using now, as you can see in this aerial photograph, it was utilizing their property. So the proposal here would be is that the city, if you're okay with it, would make a request of State Highway, and that the State Highway, that since they won't transfer it to private entities, they'll transfer it to us, is the way it's been explained to me. They'll convey this piece of land to the city of Hagerstown as a road transfer. Then we would turn around and transfer basically everything to Mr. Eby, except for the road, which we would keep as a public street because it needs to serve the 2 properties in the back. That's slightly different than what I said in the memo. I think in the memo, we talked about a license agreement and whatnot, but I think it would work that basically on the Exhibit B, if everything in yellow was transferred to him, I think that would work for us, because then we don't have any grass to mow. The only thing we'd have to deal with then is the road, which is in very good shape. It has like no traffic on it, basically. We'd have to plow snow off of it, but most likely he'd be plowing the snow off of it anyhow. And basically what this does is it gets him the land he needs to allow both of these gentlemen to expand their businesses, so.
I'm not
that's the
even sure that one house is occupied, is it? The one
It's
all
a-
the way at the back?
it's a band.
The one
And it only
house
has,
the one house is not occupied, and there's a lot back there,
Yeah.
somebody bought that they're not using because it doesn't have sewer access.
Right, it has, we looked at that house one time, it has public water and private sewer.
What's the zoning over here?
Well, behind us, there's a single house behind us, and I don't know what it's.
And that's what the private road serves, the
Yes.
house? Wow, it seems like a lot to, but I know you have to maintain service to property when it exists, but it's got, you may need to get a waiver for these parking spaces to count over here.
We may.
Because you have this barrier, so you may have to get a waiver from the planning commission.
Right.
On that. Just a
However-
heads up.
Yeah, we understand that. However, we need to go through, the first step is to
Right.
see if you're willing to make the
No,
application.
I doubt if anybody has any problems. I'm just trying to give you a heads up on
I don't have
some
any
things
problem.
coming.
And if
I think it's
Highway
great.
says they don't like the idea of it ultimately being transferred to a private entity, then we can go back to a license agreement and work with the requirements for them maintaining.
still
I have
get
no
it done.
problem with the
Yeah.
transfer.
State highways doesn't have.
I don't know.
It's just they're required to give it to a public.
They have to give it to a
Right.
public
First,
entity.
but I don't think they have
That's
an issue with
Then we
flipping it.
can, then they'll do
Yeah.
a plat and we'll give them
Yeah.
everything but the road. That's
Right.
how I see it going down.
All in
It's
favor,
the
thumbs up?
bureaucratic.
Right.
Thumbs up?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I'm glad to see the expansion.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Glad
Yeah,
business is
luck
doing
in your
good.
efforts.
Thank you.
Lou's just trying to speed us along here because we're behind on our agenda. Next up is the APFO excise tax agreement from 2005 and new APFO amendments.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening. Back with a popular topic.
Yes.
This is about the APFO for schools and the related excise tax agreement that we have with the county that dates to 2005. We're here before you because last month, the county amended the APFO to insert a new fee system in the APFO that would be collected on new development that fails the school test, but doesn't push the school beyond 120% of capacity. They basically would be collecting somewhere between $1,600 and $3,000 per unit in this case, and it would go directly to the county for their school CIP budget. Now, the question is, if we wish to continue with our agreement from 2005, the city is going to need to adopt similar amendments to our APFO, because that's the agreement. We have an APFO that's substantially similar to the county's, therefore we're able to retain 28% of the excise tax that we collect in the city. The question, as we contemplate this step, is whether to continue with a growth control and revenue generator measure from 2005 when we have vastly different circumstances now in 2013. One of the circumstances that's different is that, first I'll get at the revenue aspect. When we first adopted this agreement, the revenue potential was very high, not only because we had a lot of growth, but because the rates were very high. It was $13,000 per single-family home, $15,500 per townhome or duplex or multifamily, and then a wide range between 20 cents a square foot to $4 a square foot for non-residential development. Over the years, the county commissioners have been making amendments to those rates, which have vastly reduced the revenue capabilities, regardless of what level of growth you have, the revenue capabilities, because the rates have been so reduced. To give you an example of the impact, in last fiscal year, we permitted 55 dwelling units. If we assume, for the sake of this exercise, that they were all 2,500 square feet, basically these houses were ranging between 2,200 and 2,700. Most of it was at the Collegiate Acres. Using the 2005 rates, our 28% would have been $214,200. Using the new rates that were adopted in March, which is $1 per square foot, our percentage would have been $38,500. So it's a much reduced revenue source for us. And you couple that with the fact that back in 2005, sure, we were all doing a lot of growth. At that point, the first 3 years that we were in this agreement with the county, we were about 42% of the new residential activity in the county. In the last 5 years, if you don't count the elderly housing project on West Baltimore Street, the city's share was 21% total over those 5 years, whereas it's 76% out in the unincorporated areas. And the schools that we're trying to protect, most of them in the city are serving out in the unincorporated areas. So the city's actual share of what's happening from new development is vastly reduced. We are not seeing the rebound that is slowly occurring out in the unincorporated areas. We are still lagging in the city. So the question is whether a growth control measure still makes sense for us, particularly in light of the much reduced revenue capabilities from the excise tax. If you decide that it still does make sense for the city, then we need to amend our APFO, and we've drafted language for you, which was attached to the packet. If you do not want to continue with the agreement, then we would need to repeal the APFO. We would still collect county excise tax, but we would be transferring 100% it over to the county rather than retaining what today amounts to about 28 cents per square foot under development, which would be the city's share. But on the other hand, we also would not be subjecting property owners to the, to know that's hanging over the head of any potential new home builder or developer is an APFO for schools. And the city has trouble competing in a tight market as it is for that kind of what's out there for our community. And this is just one more hurdle that makes it difficult for property owners to find new home builders. And so that's what we're here for today. And in the packet, there's a ton of data, but I just figured, particularly in light of where we are with the evening, that I would try to summarize it.
All in favor of repealing it?
Well, I have a few more questions.
Of course you do.
I'm just,
Oh,
go ahead.
geez.
Go ahead, Marty.
I guess I had posed this to you a while ago. Did you ever find out if any other if under state law, municipalities can do an APFO of their own for the kind of services that they provide?
Yeah.
We can do an APFO for what we provide, yes. It's a little unusual to have an APFO for a service we don't provide. But we are enabled by state law to have an APFO.
So we could repeal it and then add a fee of our own for services we provide? Or would we still have to do the county?
We still would have to do the county excise tax.
And the county excise tax takes into account, theoretically, services that we provide. That's why we get the 28%.
Correct. Because we agreed to do the APFO for schools.
Yeah, I think we should take a shot at renegotiating this or something. Just repealing it still lets the county get away with murder, because they get the total proffer. I call them proffers, these offers to the schools, like in Virginia, you sort of bargain or deal. And I'm very skeptical of them, but anyhow, but we get nothing from those. And so the county can reduce the rates, but then they get the money from these proffers, from these deals with developers in total. And that's not right. But if we repeal it, the trouble with that is we're still obligated to do the APFO. Our people have to pay the fees, is that right?
We would still have to do the excise tax.
The excise tax,
But not the APFO fees.
Not the APFO, but we have to do the excise tax.
Right.
But you're saying it would encourage development.
Our people would still be paying. We wouldn't get anything from it, but we would have the freedom, so for that 28%, we'd get the freedom to approve projects. Is that right?
Right.
I mean,
I will reiterate my comments that clearly the system is broken.
Yeah, I agree on
And
that.
the actions of particularly this board have broken that system to the benefit of outside of city development occurring. I don't care how you slice it, that's the way that it occurs now, and it is at the detriment of hindering of growth within the corporate limits, not just of the city, but of all non-municipalities in the county. And I don't see any logical reason why any municipality in Washington County would continue to keep this type of APFO. The argument at its inception that it is for the benefit of preserving the integrity of low student population within the schools is completely thrown out the window when you reduce the cost of new growth to pay for that school expansion to negligible terms, and then allow for the population base to rise up to the 120% level. I mean, you're really not accomplishing that goal of both managing the size of the schools and collecting appropriate funds to pay for school expansion. And that's what this board has done by reducing that collection and increasing that flexibility on a static level. And I don't see any benefit for the city or any other municipality to continue to participate in a program that does nothing but cause harm to its ability to grow.
Anyone else?
Well, once again, I think some municipalities would say, well, you know, we want that 28% even of the lowered amount. I mean, you lose that, right?
Mhm.
So I think I think the whole thing, as Kristen said, is broken. And I'm not sure whether just throwing the baby out with the bathwater is what we ought to do. I think I need to work on this a little bit before I agree to that. I don't want to say, yes, we'll pass the amendments to go along with the county at this point. I just think.
No, I think the baby's been thrown out, and I think the bathwater's dirty at this point. I mean, that's how I
Well,
see it. We'd be
yeah.
better off to negate this altogether and charge our own impact fee of $1,000, and we'd make out nearly twice as much.
But
as the
under
median
law,
amount
we're
gonna see.
obligated to pay the excise tax. Is that
The
right?
developer is.
The developer is.
Yeah, right.
But still, the developer takes that into account, and we don't get the 28%. So, you know, I guess could explain again what we could do in approving growth that wouldn't be countermanded by any kind of APFO requirement. So could we approve growth that would send schools over what limit? Would we be obligated? I'm just trying to get a public
You mean
answer.
If we did not have an APFO?
If we did not have an APFO, our development obviously affects the school system. So if we did not have one, could we just say, we'll approve whatever we want, we don't care about the impact on the schools? Is
Right,
that-
because the APFO would only be, if we had one ourselves, it would be only for services that we provide. If we had no APFO, then it's just the normal type of approvals like we do with commercial development.
And I don't think that it is any different than the fact that if you look at the current county APFO, and folks often miss this because all we talk about is schools, but if you look at the current county APFO, it includes schools, public safety, water, sewer, and I guess parks. And you don't hear any discussion in that process of approving development coming from that partner to say, hey, do you have enough water and sewer to justify the support of this development in this time frame? We don't have those discussions about those other types of necessary public services. So I'm not certain why we would have it for that one singular
Well,
item.
I'm discussing those because we're paying, it's like the double taxation issue. We're paying the excise tax to the county that theoretically includes those items. It includes, it includes a fee for those services and education. So a developer comes in, he pays that to the county, we can't do anything about that. And then if we impose one on top of him, that's just like double taxation. It's a double excise tax. We're paying the county for those services even though they're not being a developer here. They're not provided, and if we had one on top of it, it's more expensive to build in Hagerstown than it is out in the county. Right?
That is a challenge because one of the benefits that would be to the city to remove the APFO is one more obstacles taken away to try to make us a level playing field or more competitive. But then if we adopt a fee ourselves, then yes, we've tacked on another layer that makes us less
I
competitive.
mean, I believe in excise. I believe in development taxes. I really, I think that they're the right way to go, and I don't like the way it's been handled at the county because it does mess up the municipalities. But there's got to be a better way. I'm not sure what that is than paying the county and then either losing the ability to do it ourselves, or not the ability, but losing
The feasibility.
imposing a fee that makes it more expensive to build in Hagerstown than it does out in the county.
Right, I mean, at this point, I'd rather, if you're talking about a negotiation mechanism with the county, at this point, I'd rather go to the county and say, hey, we'll keep the APFO, you get the excise tax, we want you to waive transfer taxes, we want to move existing housing stock. Those are the types of things that I think that are more palatable, more beneficial to this body and this community than the way the excise tax is going.
And I agree with Christian. It seems to me what this discussion has gotten down to is really identifying three things. One, the two choices that we're being presented with are two, what I see as rather extreme choices. Either get rid of the APFO or do the opposite, which seems both detrimental ultimately to the good of the community. And if we have to choose between those two, we're going to have to make a decision, I think, which is less undesirable, to use the two double negatives. However, what's been brought up by both Martin and Kristen is what makes all the sense in the world, and that's apparently what we have not done, and that's sit down with the county and see if there is some movement that we can come to that would be something other than the two choices we've been given. My inclination right now, and it's just an inclination, I, like Martin and Kristen, would not vote right now to amend our APFO. My gut tells me I would go with what I perceive to be somewhat of staff recommendations here, which would not be to continue with the APFO if we cannot get some resolution with the county. And I think Kristen has identified a very viable one of what he has just said. I think that fits much more into our needs right now than new construction even does, is taking care of that. So I would encourage us, either by way of the mayor or a 2x2 for this sole purpose, or of staff. I personally don't care how it's done, but I think we need to have communication with the county, its staff and elected officials, to determine whether there's any middle ground to deal with here. And if not, then we bring it back and we're told, you only have two choices. And then we have a hard decision to make, because I don't think either one of those two choices are very good choices for us.
Yeah, and it's hard to ask for a percentage of those proffers, because sometimes it's in the form of building something, right? It's not always money.
Well, right now, with what the county's done, it's an actual formula for a fee, which is what the APFO had before 2005. It was a fee. And when they made the excise tax changes, they did away with the fee in the APFO, and it just became this negotiated process if you fail the school test. Now they're creating a flat fee. It's not really a proffer, it's a fee if you fail the school test, as long as you don't push the school over 120%.
I wonder if municipalities shouldn't share in that somehow, because, again, it just goes towards schools. It doesn't bring in roads and stuff.
It's a school fee.
I understand.
So it'd be hard for us to share a school fee cost if it's a
Well,
school
then
fee.
take the, there's a lot of tricky stuff here. I think
we'll follow up
I think
then.
we need to, find a,
So the action
look
is,
for something.
I'll work with staff on following up with the county and see if we can enter into a discussion and we can bring something back to the council for action. And if anyone, offline wants to contact staff about any suggested negotiating points, I'm sure staff is all ears. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Kathy. It was a very thorough memo, and I appreciate all the data. Last but not least on our agenda are revisions to the crime-free housing proposal in Chapter 95 of the City Code. Chief Holtzman and the rest of the crew has come into the table here.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're here to cover the updates to the proposed crime-free housing ordinance and the changes to the Chapter 95, which is the excessive use of police services ordinance. I have with me Officer Jerry Kendall, who has been our leader in the crime-free program for our department, and I've asked him to come and just be prepared to talk for just a couple minutes about some of the bullet points that he's going to cover actually in the training for the landlords. He's been doing this training through the volunteer program, and he has quite an extensive training program through that. I've asked him and worked with him to condense that program down to the real highlights, and so he'll cover some of those today to give you a sense of what the landlords would experience in a training program. First thing, right off the packet memo for the crime-free housing revision, we added the definition of a rooming house that came up. How do we handle something like the Dagmar, who actually has it's a definition of a rooming house, so we've added that as an actual unit, so that is a rental facility unit. And we added clarification for the nonprofit, an exemption for the nonprofit and temporary shelters. That was a request of council to take a look at that. We felt that that just didn't fit within this crime-free provision. It is covered under the commercial part of the excessive calls for police service ordinance. In other words, they're not exempt from excessive calls, just exempts them from this actual leasing provision. And then the other one I didn't put on the packet memo here, I added it to myself, is the exemption of the owner plus one. So that was, that's in Chapter 95 there. And if you have your section there, it's on the back of the first page, right about the middle of that red wording there. We talk about, it says, so we're going to be under rental unit, the definition of rental. You do not have that one?
I was looking at it finally.
You can trust me, and we'll get you. It should have been in the packet memo. I apologize.
That's all right, keep going.
Do you have any more?
Yeah, I can go make some copies.
All right. So what we have here, I'll read it to you, is an exemption, and says where any portion of the premises is owner occupied and said premise contains no more than one rental unit. We know that is the owner plus one. So this does now exempt the owner plus one as proposed back to council here. So those are the major changes to the crime-free provision itself. The second part is the Chapter 95. And again, I apologize. We'll get you copies of this.
All right.
The changes that we made here are basically bullet pointed right in the insert in the packet memo. And what we did, we drew out the definition of an apartment complex. We were having some struggle over what a multi-unit structure was and trying to capture everything from a 3 or 4 unit apartment building all the way up to the Dagmar or the Alexander House or a larger apartment complex. So we broke those out as a separate unit, separate definition. So we defined the apartment complex as 2 or more structures, 2 or more multi-unit structures. That would be 3 or more units in it. So you could think of some place like the Bradford we talk about. It has more than one multi-unit structure in it. All those units together would entail an apartment complex. And the purpose of that would be if you started having, if we have disturbances on a parking lot, at a pool house, common areas, you can again begin to attach all those disturbances back to the apartment complex. The same thing would apply to Alexander House, 95 units, the Dagmar, 86 units, I believe, rental units, rooming units in there, and the excessive calls for service, because they have more than 50 units in one particular structure, that would be considered an apartment complex. So one single unit with 50 or more, so we're talking the large high-rises, or conglomeration of smaller multi-unit structures that are strung together on one footprint. And that's a definition we have for an apartment complex. And as a result of doing that, we adjusted some of the minimum qualifications for calls for service. Again, these are not a domestic disturbance, doesn't count. Crime victim there doesn't count. These are the types of calls that are listed, and we went over before: disorderly conduct, drug complaints, loitering, prostitution, public urination, those types of things that are occurring on the property that the police would go there. Our police officers are here with me today, and they've answered that radio many, many times. Go to the certain address, handle a certain type of call, and when they clear, the dispatcher will ask them, does that call qualify or not? And they know what those qualifying calls are. They'll say yes or no. Again, we look over each one of those before we mail out those warning letters. That's an important part. It just doesn't automatically go. We'll make an automatic notification that we were there, but before we're going to be mailing warning letters out, we'll take a review of those and make sure they do actually fit within the ordinance. A little check and balance. So the qualifying calls were adjusted to a commercial unit with 8 in 1 year. Residential unit stayed the same. A multi-unit residential structure, we reduced it to 4 in a year. And then an apartment complex, 8 in a year. So we've matched an apartment complex with some of our commercial properties that we get repeated calls at. Felt that they were pretty comparable for the use of police services, so So that's how we match those numbers up. Bullet point 5 at the bottom there, we included the language on, at, or in, and that's just to, again, expand and get those common areas within an apartment complex. And we included the mayor's request for an annual publishing of the chronic nuisance property list. So those are the additions that we made, and we'll get you the two updated ordinance. Do I have any questions from council?
Mr. Alshire.
Items 1 and 2, you could briefly explain that.
Yep.
The way I heard you say it is, number 1 adds a definition that will include rooming house
That's right.
facility and rooming unit
In the definition of a rental unit.
in the definition of rental unit that will be applicable to this program.
Correct. So if, like the Patterson across the street from us, the Patterson is a rooming house.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
the first definition that we had in this ordinance did not include a rooming house unit in a rental unit definition. In our rental facilities ordinance, we have those as two different definitions because we have different fee schedules. So we tweaked the definition of a rental unit to include rooming house units.
So when you have item number 2 that now excludes temporary shelters and treatment facilities, I guess I'm thinking not so much in terms of the temporary shelters, but treatment facilities. I mean, we got an email the other day, and you open it up, and I forget what the facility is, a way station maybe, a new center. I mean, you're talking about a rental of one of those units for, it appeared to be upwards of 18 months.
What we were looking at from a staff perspective is to research the group homes, the treatment facilities and that, and come back with a separate ordinance
Right.
that would not, that would be specific for those types of
Okay.
facilities, as opposed to including them in here.
Yeah, I mean, I see them as two different things. A temporary shelter to me says it's a temporary shelter for specific purposes, especially in cold weather months. Whereas, a treatment facility, to me, the terms that applies to, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years.
For instance, like the rescue mission, they have a short-term and a long-term program. They have a program that's under 30 days and then one that goes up to a year, and are all on the same premises. And to my knowledge, you're not using a lease. They're treatment through faith. They're not an actual treatment center. But they would be exempt under this, except they would be included in the excessive calls for service ordinance. Just because they're a nonprofit, they don't get a pass on this, being a nonprofit. And that's kind of what's unique about this ordinance, the way we're proposing it to council, and some of the other ones we mentioned back at the beginning. These documents were sort of all one document. And the fact that we started out as a city first down the excessive use of calls service ordinance really catches even the ones that we're exempting underneath the actual license requirement. So it's kind of I think a unique approach to this, and I think it benefits us here in the long run, separating these, keeping them separate. So where if it doesn't fit, or we're exempting it through the crime-free, it does not exempt it under excessive calls.
I agree with it on temporary shelters. I hear what you're saying. I don't think that treatment facilities should be exempt.
From some sort of a license requirement.
From this program. I just don't.
Any other questions or comments for the chief or staff?
I would just comment, I think we may be having to get down to definitions here. I mean, when I hear the word treatment facility, I hear one thing. When I hear the words residential treatment facilities, I hear another thing. So, 28-day program is not what I think you're addressing.
That's not where somebody's living in that established primary residence for 18 months.
Absolutely correct,
Right.
Kristen. And that's why I say there are a lot of treatment facilities that are quote, treatment facilities that are short-term programs that we send people to all the time. Then there are halfway houses in which people are usually 6 to 12 months living in a residential. I would think personally that a halfway house would be the first place that we would require this. These people are living there for excess of one to 2 months at a time.
They are renting a room.
And they're renting a room.
Bathroom and kitchen down the hall, similar to what they set up
And,
at the
and
Jaguars.
they come in to us with a known quantity, most of them, and a substantial amount of them are from the Baltimore metropolitan Annapolis area. And to say that the people that we're going to exempt are the criminals from out of the county who come here to live for 6 months, but we'll exempt them, I don't think makes any sense, because I think those are the landlords that really need to understand what the requirements are.
Thank you.
I would like to think, that their facilities would be the same, although, there are some facilities that believe you get 1 strike and you're out, and there are others that believe you get 3 strikes and you're out. And I think that, to me, is where the distinction comes in, whether it's residential facility or whether it's a short-term treatment facility.
So what we've been talking about is on the back of the first part, on the crime-free multi-housing, in red, listed as rooming house facility or rooming house unit. So we can work with Mr. Boyer to make the adjustments there to expand that. Okay. We're comfortable with that. We'll try to expand that definition to include more of a residential treatment facility and exclude a temporary treatment facility. All right. I'll lean on Mr. Boyer to help us out with that one.
And I know there's
just have you come here and sit.
there's been some feedback and discussion about eliminating the owner plus one. Is that something
Yes.
we want to talk about?
I think there's general agreement with that. I agree with it. You agree with it, don't you?
I won't support the document if that's
Right.
not in it.
Right. Getting rid of
That's where I stand.
owner plus one, yeah.
Well, that's two. I want to hear from some other folks about eliminating the owner plus one. I think the idea being that if you live right next door to a nuisance and you own that property, that you're going to know what's going on.
Right, you're still subject to the nuisance calls.
Absolutely.
Still subject to that, but the idea here, as I understand this, is letting the landlords know what's actually going on in their residences, and I would like to think an owner who has someone living next door doesn't need to find that out.
I guess I can go along on the condition that if staff can come in with examples where that's not working effectively, we'll change it. I mean, I think we
Right.
should be open to change it. If they can come in with examples
Absolutely.
that, hey, if we had had this tool that would have worked, then we can change it. So I'm willing to go along under that condition.
Understood.
I agree.
Okay.
I have gotten some very negative calls and emails, letters.
We all have done.
From people who have, whom I really respect in this community. And most of them seem to claim the same thing. They do not understand why they have to be the police when we have a budget for police. Can somebody comment on that?
Nobody's asking them to be police. I think most of the emails I'm getting, like you're getting, Don, are ones that, as I perceive, don't understand what this program is about. Right. This program is about, 1, education, 2, requiring a lease, which, as I understand it, will make forms available. It's not like they won't be made available. 3, the one-time, relatively short educational session. And that's essentially it, licensed, and then they just get notified. They're not required to do anything if they don't want to. But eventually, what's going to happen if they don't do something and we keep getting the nuisance calls, then we're the police. They're not. Nobody's asking them to police. They're asking them to be informed of what's going on in their places that they're running. I don't know how a landlord knows that there are multiple calls to his residence that he's leasing if he's not living in the area, if no one notifies them. And it's, as I understand this, that's what this is about, is education and notification. And if I'm missing something, I would really like to know it, and at no expense to anyone. Matter of fact, it's sort of the opposite. It's sort of, we're offering a service for free. We're offering an educational service, we're offering lease forms, and I am sure that any landlord in the world who wanted to call HPD and say, I need some assistance in this area, would get it at no charge. So it's, we're offering a, you know, there are many people out there that we're getting these from that look at this as a burden and an onus, and I just don't see it. I see a one-time requirement of education, and I think that we have had some discussions, and I would like that more well, we did discuss one of the reasons for the continued is to keep up with the technology and the things are going on. But I don't think once a year, as I understand, this once every 2 years this educational session is, and the licensing is of no expense and no cost, and they're not required to do anything. We're not asking them to police. If they want to have tenants living in their apartment complexes that cause 20 calls for service, they can do that. There's already a law on the books without this law right here that's going to penalize them for that. That there's, as I understand it, there is no stick in this law at all.
Well,
Is that right?
we've reduced the number of calls.
We've reduced the number of calls, and that's something to be
would
discussed.
trigger the penalties.
But other than that, this law has no sticks in it, does it?
Well, the crime-free does if you rent without
If you
using
rent
a crime
without a license,
provision, without using that lease provision in there would be a violation. Leasing it without having an operator's license would be a violation. That's the only way you would get a violation
And
underneath
these
this.
things, and the things we're talking about are no expense, correct?
Right. Yeah, and Jerry's here if you want. He can hit a few highlights because it is really education-based and information-based, and it is a lot of extra effort on the part of the police and code enforcement to share this information. We're going to use our technology to send some emails as best we can, but it's going to be a letter-writing campaign, and it will be some effort.
The other thing maybe we need to do is you have provided to us information, I think, from a community in Ohio, if I'm correct. Was it Ohio?
Illinois.
Illinois, excuse me.
Illinois.
You know, we saw how well that worked from the community basis. I'm wondering if we could reach out to those folks, to some of the major landlords in that area, and see how it's worked for them. Also,
We've had some discussions with the program director, right? We could.
I think that would be real good because, again, I think we've already seen it with the Bradford, and it seems to me that those who take advantage of this may find that it actually inures to their pocketbook and is not the issues that we're hearing. And I understand people don't like government intrusion. And the other thing that I would like to say about this is this program, I think this is something you had talked about, Kristen, that's used in Frederick. Is that correct or not?
No.
So this is all generated straight from our police department?
Yes.
100%. This is not something that elected officials came up with thinking it's a great idea, but HPD, who's done the research and found it successful, and on a voluntary basis, it has worked both for the landlord and the citizens and the tenants.
Yeah. The man sitting next to me came up with this. He's been running this volunteer program and sales pitched this to us a while ago. We didn't think we could handle it staff-wise, and it's still going to be tough for us. But you know, we're committed to get this project going. I think in the long run, it's going to do a good service for us as a city. You want to cover a couple of the highlights?
Well, wait a minute. My question was really aimed at you, Chief. Well, not another council member. Would you respond to my question?
Sure. Policing a property. What we want them to do is actively manage their property. That's the answer there. I'd use an example where a property owner calls us and says, hey, I'm having a disturbance here. Can you come and help me out with it? And then we wouldn't count that against them. That's actively managing a program. It's when it's completely ignored, when no reasonable steps are taken by that property owner, at that point, they're going to subject themselves to fines. You know, repeated calls to the same location puts a stress on the neighborhood, puts stress on neighbors, other tenants in the building, and we just think it's generally unfair to do that and to continue to just ignore the issue. Send a letter, ignore the issue. I don't believe we're going to run into much of this. I think once we open up the lines of communication and share with them that we were there for disturbance, we were there for disturbance again 3 days later, and 5 days after that, everybody's going to get the picture. We have a problem here. And then it's communicate with that landlord as to what reasonable steps are to take action on that. So we recently met with the Landlord Association, who I know sent a letter to council, and I asked them what some of the reasonable steps would be, and they told me, I said, can you explain some reasonable steps from your perspective? And it was, you know, contact that they would, if we notify them that there's a problem, they would recommend sending a letter, telephoning the tenant, stopping by and talking to the tenant and giving them another written letter, and at some point their next step would recommend evicting the tenant. But that's all actions the landlord can take. And then the police job is to support them with reports, any information they need to facilitate that action in court and reduce their risk of ever getting a fine.
Let me ask you about that, because some people have said, you know, I might have a problem tenant, but it takes me forever to get them evicted. Are there any tools that the city can implement that would help along those lines? I mean, I know there's a judicial process.
It's right there.
It's right in here.
there.
This
Because that's
crime-
what I've told those that didn't want to listen.
Yeah, the crime-free provision is about the strongest language that we were able to come up with.
So in other words,
to trigger
having that language in their lease is really what helps them be able to evict them
It's a breach of
It's also part of
lease.
the educational
with
component of the
swiftness.
program.
Correct.
Because I know Officer Kendall's had different attorneys come in and address the court process and how you can address these issues through that.
I just wanted to put that out there because that's one of the frequent things that I'm picking up in these communications we're getting is that even when people have these problem tenants, they feel like they can't evict them with any kind of expediency.
And there are plenty of stories like that. And our idea would be, as long as you're continuing to take reasonable steps, you know, we're not out to get you. It's continue to talk to us, continue to take reasonable steps. If you get down to court, I've used the example, and you're not granted an eviction, you've done what you can do. But we're going to continue to share the information with you. We went there again, continue to support the letters, you know, exactly what's going on at your property.
Jerry, are there other large complexes that are part of this program at this point?
We've got, right now, the Bradford, Bethel Gardens Apartments, Pangborn Heights Apartments, Cortland Apartments are currently in Phase 2 of the crime-free program. Edgewood Hills Apartments are currently in Phase 2 of the program. North Spring Apartments want to do it. They're, I guess, in negotiations with code compliance over a series of violations they just received, so they have to fix those before they can proceed any further. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of interest. I've got another gentleman owns, I just spoke with him the other day. I believe he's over here on South Prospect. Owns some condominiums over there that they want to get involved with the program.
Okay.
So in the program you're talking about is the volunteer
The
program.
volunteer
which-
program.
Which, the training for that is really extensive.
Okay, Chief, when the hookah bar across the street opened, I understand that because of your influence, there was a crime-free lease provision put in their lease. Is that correct?
You're familiar with the owner there?
I'm not familiar with that one at all.
I can't speak for certain for that one. I know we've shared, Officer Kendall shared his crime-free provision widely and extensively in different training seminars that he has. If they were able to use that and then use that crime-free provision to ultimately evict that tenant when they were caught for criminal activity, I think that's where we're going with this story.
Okay, so maybe I was misinformed by the landlord over there.
Okay.
That there was no crime-free lease provision when the hookah bar opened. and the lease was established with the hookah bar owners.
So that would have been a commercial property?
Right.
So that would not have fallen under what I deal with as strictly residential?
Okay, so there was no crime-free lease provision in there?
No, I'm not familiar with the lease in that.
Okay, because Mr. Cushwaw, who owned the property, told us, he emailed us, and specifically told us there was a crime-free provision in that lease, and he was grateful that he could exercise that provision.
Again, it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell
And
where.
he indicated that I think it was the chief of police who encouraged that the crime-free lease provision be put in there.
And he's owned that property a long time.
Where's Art?
And yeah, he could have actually received that from Chief Smith.
And he was grateful because as a result of their selling drugs out of that place, he was allowed to immediately terminate that lease.
Yeah. I understood that letter to be that the lease was up at the end of this month and he wasn't going to renew it. That's
Now,
my understanding.
as I understand it, Chief, I want you to clarify if I've read this thing over and over and over. And as I understand it, essentially, all this crime-free lease provision does is allow the property owner to break the lease if certain criminal aspects are undertaken by the tenant. Isn't that all it's about?
You have it in a nutshell.
I mean,
Yeah,
there's some education, yeah, but education's not a bad thing. So if someone in the property next door to me commits a crime, and I go and complain and moan and bitch to the landlord, then that landlord has the opportunity to get rid of that drug dealer or thief or whatever he is, or
Right,
she.
what we would do there, we would share the information with the property owner if they had a crime-free provision. It would trigger that. It would trigger a breach of lease. Again, the landlord would have to take them to court. The judge would have to agree that that is a material breach of the lease, and then award the eviction. So that would certainly be a reasonable step to take in that circumstance.
Just to be clear, though, the ordinance does not require a conviction of a crime in that case.
No, no, it shouldn't.
It would be the preponderance of the evidence of criminal activity.
Okay, I want to know how this would work. This is an actual case. I live at 117 West Magnolia. A couple of years ago at 119 West Magnolia, about 15, 18 feet from me, the lady who lived there moved in a man who just was released from prison, and he was a sex pervert. He had perverted 2 children. I don't know why I ever got out of prison. He should have been there for an entire lifetime. But he moved in next door to me. And the first thing I remember about it is my wife called me at 2 o'clock in the morning one night to tell me that there was a rapist living alongside me. And then the whole neighborhood started calling me. This was when I was still in Annapolis. So that circumstance comes up. What could be done about that circumstance?
About a sex offender moving in next door, this would not cover that. What this is going to cover is if that person were to begin to break the law on that property, especially if it were anything that constituted a felony that took place on the property, that would trigger the excessive calls for service and would trigger the breach of the lease. Being released from prison and being there, this does not cover that. Some property owners do screen. Officer Kendall would teach screening techniques, but this does not require any screening to take place. We just educate them how to screen. So
It may be deficient in that regard.
Well, unfortunately, there really isn't too much that you can do because I have a situation that's right down for me, and 2 of them have moved in, both were in prison, and is raising wholly in the neighborhood, and I'm told you know,
If there's a- Right. if
by
there's-
code, basically, there isn't anything that you can
If-
really
if there's-
do.
if there-
Anybody can live anywhere, regardless of prisoners or
That's
not.
not necessarily true. If there's a minor, if there's a minor child in the family where the pervert's living, there is something
No,
that you
you're
can
talking
do.
that instant, but I'm talking otherwise, okay?
Okay, but if that, if that exists, and
Yeah.
that's not unusual.
Yeah.
Okay, so why am I hearing constantly that we don't want to be the police? I mean, this doesn't seem to bear any relationship to.
Because they're not educated. They need to take the class so they know what the police's role is in their
Yeah.
relationship with their tenants.
I mean, ultimately, the landlord is the landlord, and the landlord should be able to go and to see what is going on in their
don't disagree
apartment
with that.
complex or whatever. But for some unknown reason, I guess they don't want to do that. And then again, they give you to property management, who then has control, who doesn't have control all the time. So that's the part that I really am not happy about. I think that each person who owns the property should be the one to attend this, and not an agent. Because a lot of times, the landlord is still not getting the message. He's getting the money, but he's not getting the message.
Okay, thank you.
Could you cover a couple of points that you'll go over in the training class?
I think some of the things that are part of the training class, I might answer some of your questions. The first line of defense that we have that we teach is the lease application. And that's where we want the landlords or the property managers to start asking the right questions. This is like the first line of defense, the first tool in the toolbox that they have, to ask the right questions. They can look into a person's criminal background. They can search their names, see if they fall under the Megan laws. These are things that we encourage them to look for. And it's kind of like, a lease application is kind of like the first interview for a job. You're sitting down with that person, you're gathering information. If they start leaving, we educate them. If they have blanks or gaps in the lease application, that tells them that there's something that they need to dig further to see what's going on with this possible tenant. Then farther in the training, we talk about specifically our crime-free lease addendum. In the crime-free program itself, we would talk about the language in the ordinance in this training and what tools, again, that gives the landlords. And we're going to get into some general lease knowledge. I have found that there are a lot of landlords out there that don't know what a holding over is or what a breach of lease is. And just to educate them on this general knowledge of what they can and can't do. Victims of domestic violence specifically, there's a whole section of the law that they can't be evicted because they're a victim. And we don't want to, see those as victims. We want to take care of those. Tenant screening services that are available. We are not advocating, we're not requiring any tenant screening. We can't really do that. But we want to let them know these services available, whether it's through the Washington County Landlords Association or online services, LexisNexis, or just going to Maryland Judiciary Case Search. These are avenues where, if you're going to be a responsible landlord, you take that extra step, and this is where the information's at. And these are all low to no cost. And we teach that, they can charge a fee of up to $25, whatever it takes to conduct these backgrounds, and they can charge that to the prospective tenant. So the landlords, again, are not losing any money out of their own pocket in the screening process. So there are some community and property rules that a landlord can put into their property. One that I'm very proud of, actually Mr. Shaul has, he owns the Cortland Apartments in Edgewood Hills. He sent a letter out to his managers and copied that to the Washington County Office of Community Supervision, that he will not allow anybody that is on parole or probation to live in his properties. That's a rule that he can enforce as the owner. And so that's another tool that's available to property managers. They can set certain rules within certain guidelines for the governance of their property. They can't have extreme things, but, certain things they can make rules for their properties. Then we go into some fire safety requirements. Again, teaching them how effective having the fire extinguishers and smoke detectors are in the property, and show them how to use them and how to educate their tenants and things that they need to have as far as egress from the apartments. Many of these are covered under code, but we're just kind of reinforcing that for the fire department and for code enforcement to keep the education level up. We talked a little bit about some crime prevention tactics, our CPTED, the crime prevention through environmental design, how maintaining their property, how the landscaping and the lighting and just the general upkeep of their properties help keep their tenants safe and increase that quality of life value for the tenants. Then we can talk about some about the target hardening, making sure, teaching the landlords about the proper types of locks for the doors, how to have a solid core door and the right kind of peephole and proper locks in the windows, those sorts of things, again, to reinforce the safety aspect for the tenants. And then we also get into a review of the city ordinances. So as part of the training, we will go through the excessive calls for police services, talk about the landlord licensing if you know we get that far with it. And other ordinances as they will apply to the properties and any questions that they have concerning those. Then we'll get into a little bit of a discussion, a little bit of training on what some illegal activity looks like in their rental properties. If they have, they know of a tenant that's got, you know, persons coming over to one of the units, coming in, staying for a few minutes and then leaving, and this goes on all night, you know, that's definitely an idea of illegal drug activity going into the property. So that's something they can notify us with, work with the task force, you know, and we can proceed with an investigation from there. Again, working with the landlord, giving them information as we get it, or working on an investigation to take care of that problem for them. And then again, and adding on to that, we'll get into a little bit of general gang information, to let them know if they see this and this, this could be something for them to look at and work with us again on more information. And then letting them know, if you see just this one thing, it doesn't mean this person's a gang member. You know, it's the totality of circumstances and totality of different things, and educating them on those sorts of things. There's many times that I've got a phone call from somebody, I've seen this person walking down the alley and they had a blue bandana sticking out of their pocket. Are they a gang member? Well, that doesn't mean they're a gang member at all. It just means they like blue bandanas. But if they're, you know, I tell them if they're all dressed in blue and they have the bandana in a certain pocket and they've got tattoos that say this, and well, then that gives us a little bit more, you know, of a thought there that this could be. Again, you think something suspicious or concerns you, call us and we will come out and investigate. So it's just, it's all knowledge for the property managers and the landlords is that we're giving to them so that they can make the sound decisions that they need to make in governing and running their properties.
Thank you, Chair.
You are going to become part of this program, if it passes, full-time in February, is that correct?
As our staffing gets up, yes, sir.
I'm sorry, what?
As our staffing gets up there, yes, sir. He'll be running this program for us. Yeah, it's going to be a big commitment for our department, but you know, I think in the long run, you know, we'll see our overall calls for service come down. If we get the results that they're seeing in places like Mount Prospect, they're seeing over a 20% drop in their calls for service at these places.
I'm aware that
that's just an incredible statistic.
27%, I think the number was.
Yeah. So.
And I would just say, I think that then translates into quality of life in our neighborhoods. Again, from my perspective, it's about strong neighborhoods.
So implementation for us, what I envision, council member, is as our staffing does increase, what we'll start off with is a pure education base, because it's just going to be teaching classes. So we'll begin to pare off some of Officer Kendall's time for that. As we get into a full implementation, we're talking about managing hundreds and hundreds of crime-free licenses. It will require a full-time status. So it'll be sort of a gradual process into that.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Any other questions or comments from council members?
Just a quick comment, John especially, if there's any way to streamline this in connection with other things like rental registration and so forth, let's look for them, or we can
Absolutely, sir.
overlap or do time periods that are the same and things like that, because there's just a lot to absorb if you're a property owner.
Absolutely, sir. And I've met with my staff, and what we envision is just that, to streamline it. The first year, we're going to have some bumps, but the renewals should be seamless, the same as someone provides lead paint information currently on a form to the city. The state mandates that someone has to plug in a lead paint number. They would just write in their license operator number. Same number of mailings, same process, and the only addition is administrative aspects on our end after someone attends the training.
Okay, but if there's things we can do to streamline, bring it to us.
Absolutely, sir.
So that this whole amalgam of stuff can be absorbed and be met at regular intervals.
Yes, sir.
Instead of having to think, oh, it's 2 years for this, 3 years for that, 1 year for this. I think it would work better. And I think also having a simple property owner's guide or something that bullet points what you got to do. And easy to understand. Having the detail as backup, but here's what you got to do if you're a property owner, beyond the owner plus one,
Yes. I think we all would anticipate an education effort kicking off in advance of
Right.
this to educate property owners on what the process is and on how to schedule the training and things
Yeah, I
of that
think
nature.
both those things will make it go smoothly and answer a lot of the objections we're hearing.
Good point, sir, and we'll make sure we hit those.
Okay, one more question and I'm finished, I'm sorry. If there were a crime-free lease in every residential provision right now, and the guy in the problem house, one of the problem houses on Mulberry Street, was caught for selling drugs. He was busted for selling drugs, but got bonded out. Then the owner of that house, or the person that manages that property, could immediately abrogate his lease, if he wished, immediately abrogate the person's lease and tell him to get out without any liability whatsoever. Is that correct?
I defer to Mr. Boyer.
That's not correct. He has a process to go through. State of Maryland's got fairly stringent requirements to evict someone from a property. He'd have to start the process in district court, and he'd be in front of a judge at some point to make his case to have the tenant evicted.
So this is really no guarantee that that person's going to be thrown out of the property.
It would depend on the facts of each case.
Depends on who the judge is.
It may depend on who the judge is.
But it does make sure there's a provision in the lease that allows that to happen.
Correct. It's the tool to get you.
Make sure that tool's there. And if there's too many other things, then it can be enforced. Too many violations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thanks for all your work on this.
Bring this back in early
Thanks,
December
guys.
at the work session with
Sure.
just the updated language.
Thank you much. That brings us to city administrator's comments.
None for me this evening.
Council comments. Mr. Brubaker.
Well, first of all, I want to encourage people to use the new Mills Park Trail that was dedicated this afternoon. It goes in from Northern Avenue on the Legion side, and there's an interesting sign of information to take your kids to in the middle. I won't say what the subject is, but it's interesting to follow. Well done bulletin of information. The second thing I wanted to say is we talked about water and sewer rates, and just to put it in perspective where we are, I did a quick calculation with some numbers the staff had provided. In Hagerstown, the combined water and sewer rate in FY14 for a typical quarterly user was $100.18. Of the major cities around here, the next closest was Martinsburg, and theirs was $173.91, 70%, more than 70% higher. Frederick was 176, again, more than 70%. Cumberland was 216, more than 100% higher. And Winchester was higher than that, 239, well more than 100% higher. So, you know, the rate, while I'm going to look for ways to smooth out those rate increases, we're already starting at a very bargain rate in our system. And then I guess the final thing I had to say real quickly was, by my calculation, 6 out of the 11 staff agenda items showed staff effort outside the box, and I'm going to thank staff for that. I won't go through each one, but I thought there were a lot of examples tonight of people working with citizens groups on original ideas and, you know, thinking outside the box that to be commended for.
Indeed. Mr. Metzner. Ms. Nye.
Nothing.
Mr. Munson.
Just two quick things. First, again, thanks to the Light Department personnel for restoring the electricity so rapidly Monday night after the wind blew through. And also thanks to the chief of the police department for initiating the community policing process in the east end of Hagerstown, where there have been some serious troubles, and having a police officer on the ground out there is going to help a lot. Thank you.
Mr. Alshire.
Just a couple of things. The first is the discussion we had about the bear statue in City Park this evening. I would only note that, while I guess my response appeared lukewarm, one thing that I would like to see is when we discuss items of additional expense, you know, that we know where that's coming from, because we sat and talked about 5,000 and 2,000, and you know, we talk about a lot of things related to finances and the limited ability we have with them. I think it's important, you know, when we talk about these types of non-necessary obligations, that we identify the funding source from which they're coming, if it's hotel, motel, or what have you. The other item is Don and I both attended the EDC meeting last Thursday. It was generally uneventful, and the last item is, as other members have alluded, we have received, I wouldn't call it a significant, maybe a dozen or so responses from both citizens and property owners and managers related to the crime-free residential program. I would say that of those 12 or 14 responses, they have generally been 50-50, you know, in support and probably in support and opposed, and if not, just simply having questions. And I have responded to each of those in turn. So, you know, if you have a letter to send in or a phone call or an email, I think that any one of the members of Mayor and Council and any one of our staff that were here this evening would be more than willing to explain, as Lou pointed out, what is and what is not, you know, in this effort.
All right. And my only comment is I want to reiterate what Mr. Brubaker said about thanking staff. We have a tremendous staff here who work daily to better our city and work for the people. The trail that we just dedicated today was 2 years in the making, reaching out, building partnerships, so I want to thank them for that. And I also want to thank all the people who volunteer on our boards and commissions. We're having a luncheon this Friday I wanted to remind everybody about at noon at the Academy Theater, so I hope everybody on the council can turn out for that. It's a great way of giving thanks to those people who volunteer their time for various boards and commissions. With that, I will entertain a motion to go into executive session for 2 points of order: to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice regarding a contract, and also to conduct collective bargaining negotiations.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Nye. All in favor of going into executive session, please say aye. Any opposed?
No.
All right.
Any information?
We'll go into executive session after a 5-minute break.